Hello, YouTube. It's Shin Tiger Curl here, that dude in the straw hat, bringing you a nice little evening of Shin Tiger Curl streaming. And see who's in the chat. We got my boy Scott, aka Car Junkie from Rift Downs. How you doing? How's it going, man? Started exactly at 7 o'clock. This will be my first stream with the new computer. My old computer still works, it just wasn't optimized or working properly for editing or anything that I needed to do. It just kept freezing on me, but this one is working a little better. Upgraded with some RAM. My old computer was 8 RAM. This is double that, so 16 RAM. So hopefully we won't get any drop frames. We're gonna wait like 5 minutes for people to start filtering in. And we're just going to shoot the shit for a little bit before I start the reading. Get plenty of water. So how's everybody in the chat? Oh, you had work today, CJ? CJ worked at a car dealership. So there's that. Dude works very, very hard. Speaking of, CJ, how am I sounding? Sounding too quiet, too loud? Let me know. Because I can't hear myself when I'm because of my compressor microphone of how it's set up. Probably have to get an external speaker one of these days so that I can be able to hear some stuff. And while that's happening, hopefully, if you are new to this channel, if you want to enjoy some stuff, just drop it in the chat. Let me know so I can say what's up. We can have some fun tonight. Sorry, I just had Whataburger. Nice double Whataburger. Had to take out the tomatoes because I don't like tomatoes. I just don't. All right. If you have not seen it, this is the new layout. I actually had this layout made about 2-3 months ago. Had a little extra money left over from a very generous patron, and I decided just to get a new layout for whenever I stream. I plan to, if my capture card is working, I might stream some games with it. But yeah, it's a very One Piece inspired layout. And I hope you're enjoying it. I paid like $15 for it. It's good stuff. All right, thank you, Scott. Thank you. Oh, what you have from HEB? Probably a sandwich or just a TV dinner or something. All right. And as a matter of fact, if you guys are watching this, drop in the comments, drop in the chat. Let me know what you had for dinner. Everybody needs dinner. All right, just got to share this up with a few folks I know. All right, there's that. I know shit. All right, that's shared up. Alrighty then. I forgot to add you. Forgot to put you in there, Jessica, because you're here. All right, that's all shared up. Oh, the simple meals. How was it? What'd you have? If you can tell me. All right, just gotta clear my throat so I don't stumble over my words. All right. Oh, and also a late l'chaim to my friend CJ in the chat. This week was Hanukkah. He's Jewish, so I just gave him that just to be courteous, kind. All right. If anyone else is in the chat, what is your religious preferences? What are you celebrating this December? I'm of course Buddhist, but I choose to celebrate Christmas because Christmas is awesome. That's just what I choose to do. Oh, shrimp and mac and cheese. That sounds delicious. Makes me want to have some. Oh, hello there, Pugsley. She had 3 boxes of cupcakes. What was hold on, let me stretch this out a little bit so I can see. Oh. Oh, okay. Oh, so Pugsley is still at work. She works at BJ's. If you don't know what that is, just look it up. Yeah, that sounds like a mess right there. Labeling boxes of cupcakes. I'm sorry about that, hon. I didn't do much for Hanukkah. Okay, all right. All right. I'm not even sure what Jewish people do for Hanukkah, other than listen to Adam Sandler songs. I'm sorry. All right. With enough with that out of the way. All right, I'm gonna get me a little drink of something to. Oh, okay, my mistake, Pugsley. My mistake. All right, with that out of the way, I gotta wet my whistle a little bit, and then we can get down to business. Hopefully, you guys got something to munch on, or something to drink. Maybe some spirits, or maybe some soda, or something. I don't know what your drink of choice is for tonight. Yep. All right. Whistle is wet. And let me just give one last double check on how my shared up streams are doing. All right. That's all done. Okay, we're... okay, too early this year. You did say that. My mistake. All right, we're going to... There's nothing wrong with tangerine tea, Pugsley. That sounds actually pretty good. I don't mind tangerine. It's actually pretty good. I wouldn't mind. Send me some of that. I want it. All right. We got some... Got a small little group here. Not too many, but that's more than I expected. All right, we will be reading the first 2 chapters of my book, New World. I was planning on doing this last time, but we were suffering from some major technical issues. I kept dropping frames to the point where the stream became literally unwatchable, so I decided to hold off from doing any kind of streaming until I got a better computer, and I do have a better computer now with some more RAM. So, and judging from my analytics, judging by my analytics, I'm not dropping any frames. CJ says I'm coming through nice and clear. Burp. Sorry. Remind me to try almond milk one day. I keep meaning to try, but I keep forgetting. But all right, like I said, I will be reading the first 2 chapters of my book, including the prologue. Prologue sets things up pretty nicely. If you have a copy of the book, either on Kindle or paperback, crack it open right now so we can start getting started. I will pause. I make a small little break in between chapters so people can stretch their legs, get something more to refill their refreshments or something to eat or anything like that. I'll do the same with the prologue just to see how many people sift in so they know where they're coming in. Okay. That out of the way. If you guys are, oh hello, hey Griff, haven't seen you in a while. Hey brother. Oh, and a happy L'chaim to you. He's Jewish as well. All right, so since you just came in, like I said, we'll be doing the first 2 chapters with prologue. We'll do a break in between chapters so people can stretch their legs or to go to the bathroom, get something to eat, something to drink. But just generally, if you have a copy of the book, crack it open. It was on Kindle, but I'm trying to find another place to upload it digitally. But the paperback is still available on Amazon for $17.99. Buy yourself a copy. You can, if you don't like to read it, you can use it as a blunt force instrument to resist home invaders because it is a big boy. So there's that. All right, with that out of the way, let's get started. I'll be reading this on my Kindle Cloud Reader. I do have a copy of it borrowed on my Kindle Cloud Reader that's on my laptop. I won't be able to look at the chat or anything else. So, but I'll do it periodically just to make sure that everything's cool and copacetic in the chat. All right, with that out of the way, let's get started. This is New World, written by Greg Haynes, illustrated by my friend. The cover was done by friend of the show, Evil Reverend, and edited by Molly Muse, Mark Muse's significant other. Thank you. All right. Prologue. I popped into the streets of New York City on a late summer night. Some people call what I do teleportation. I particularly don't like that term. It lacks personality. That's why I prefer my own term for it. Popping. From what people have said, that's the sound that accompanies me whenever I appear in a place. A nice, pleasant pop. I enjoy popping. It's certainly faster and neater method of travel. Certainly better than space folding, which requires an insane amount of equipment, planning, and in some cases a second brain for the bigger calculations. And the less said about how the giant roaches of Brixus 2 get around, the better. But I digress. Like I said, I popped onto the streets of New York City. The night was a bit on the hot side, but a nice little drizzle of rain kept the heat at bay. I opened my umbrella over my head. I wasn't going to get sick anymore. I wasn't going to get sick anytime soon, but, you know, old habits and all. I pulled out my pocket watch and snapped it open. As an immortal being who can freely traverse space and time, it's very important to get the times and the dates just right. August 2nd, 1047 NW. Right smack dab in the reign of the Grand Vampiric Empire. Oh, I do love this time period. Some would say that the golden age of mankind about 1,000 or so years ago might be a better one. It certainly sounds better on the tongue, but not for me. Personally, this is the age to visit. Why? Well, just take a look around. The buildings are a mix of old and new. The older buildings could be nearly 1,000 years old, relics of an age long since passed into history. Their simple architecture showing fingerprints of human design and aesthetics. Some are still quite livable, but not to the level they once were. Towering over them is the current skyline with its imposing gray-blue colors and sleek contours, but not so big as to obstruct the view of the night sky, the stars, and the cracked quarter moon in all of its mangled glory. This was a signature of elven architecture, advancement but with a respect for the natural world. Along the bottoms, along the sides, bear the telltale marks of dwarfish engineering. To an untrained eye, it would seem as nothing is out of the ordinary, but to someone like me who frequents this time a lot, they might as well have just signed their names on these buildings. I passed a pair of lichened police officers of the IPD, seated and enjoying some nice chupacabra sandwiches, made fresh by a gnome who runs a stand nearby. I see him greasing up the griddle for the night rush. Chupacabra is a very popular street food, but if it's cooked just right. And this particular gnome is a master of this art, having been here nigh up to 40 years. Across the street, I caught sight of a trio of succubi, leaving their apartment and preparing to go to work in the oldest trade in the world. Not that I would know anything about that. I just happen to know this group of girls. Very nice young ladies. I stopped at the corner of the street, waiting for the light to change so that I may cross. The air was clean, lacking the lingering odor of fossil fuels and gasoline that died out more than 8 centuries ago. The subtle humming of the dozens of ether drives that are now common in vehicles both large and small was the background music of this age. Certainly much better than the loud rumblings of the internal combustion engines of old. The light turned green. I walked across the street, barely catching sight of a troop of roof runners sliding down the rooftops to street level and heading into a store. They were probably getting some refreshments. I was nearly hit by a Yeti and his dwarf wife walking out of a fancy restaurant run by a rather personable vampire. He held her on his shoulder, smiling confidently about his beloved. Such sights you will only see here. Now what am I doing here? Well, it has something to do with my hobby. Well, what kind of hobby does a being such as I would have? Simple, I read. Yes, I do read, but not books or magazines or comics. No, I read people. I read their lives, their births, their deaths, their strengths, their weaknesses, the good times, the bad times, the in-between times, the highs, the lows, the mids, the boring bits, the exciting bits, all of it. Reading a person's life is more enjoyable than any book you could ever imagine. Now the question becomes who to read. Well, I've read quite a number of interesting people before. Abraham Lincoln was one of my earliest reads. Intriguing. Very intriguing. Ironic that a man with such a low self-image would almost be deified by later generations. Alexander the Great. Now that was a good one. Kind of short, but riveting. Seeing a human with such ambition was marvelous to behold. I think the last person I read from this era was Saint Sebastian, the first sovereign pope of the Protectorate of Vatican. Now there was a visionary. A man so concerned about mankind's future that everything he did was in some way beneficial to the humans that came after him. A forward thinker if there ever was one. I think I have an idea who to read now. Lucas Kane. Ah, yes. I've been meaning to read him for a while. Especially with the things that are about to happen. You see, oh no. I can't do that. That would be spoiling. We'll find out about him together. So, where is he? If I remember correctly, he and his crew should be on the other coast. Los Angeles, I believe. So, if he's there, then why am I here? Simple. To buy a burn dog. You can't start reading a person's life on an empty stomach, and one of the best here, particularly at this little stand at 34th Street and Riker. Ah, the marriage of odors is always a pleasure to my nose. You can smell the Texas spice. With burn dog in hand, I popped out of the street and once again found myself in the rainbow kaleidoscope of the interdimensional backspace. As I navigated my way to the proper time-space location, I am reminded again why I love this new world. Things that would be considered improbable, inconceivable, and impossible are as common as walking down the street or putting on your shoes, where myth and legend weave with reality to create a world full of wonders both subtle and gross. It is full of pleasures to tease your soul and terror that will freeze your blood. How can this be, you ask? Simple. Because this is the new world. And in the new world, everything is possible. And that ends the epilogue. A nice little teaser of things to come, and with an introduction to our dear narrator. We will get more into him later. All right. Someone messaged me on Facebook. Just got a... it's a new friend of mine. Okay, she asked me if I was online. I told her yes, I was. So we got that. We got 4 viewers. Again, if you're in the chat, say hi. Oh, hey, Devil Pogo Stick, old friend of the show, old friend of mine. Stuck at work as always. He works retail. I really feel for you, brother. Glad you're here. Glad I could give you something to make your work hours a little bit less monotonous and tedious. Something to drink. Okay. All right. Just gonna make sure. We're gonna have someone else join in on the chat. All right, just had to let someone know what was going on. All right, actually 4 viewers. This is actually not bad. Yeah, I try to be double because life should be more fun. Life's too short to be stressing and worrying. You just gotta take some time out and have some fun. All right. Sorry, I cut my tongue there. A little bit of tooth fell out. Teeth are still disintegrating, but still doing my job here. All right. Just make some adjustments. Give me some more water. Run out. Well, that's actually root beer, but I got some water left over. All right. Everyone's still in the chat. Everybody's still ready. All right. Now it's time to move on to chapter 1 of our story. All right. Everybody ready? Chapter 1. A simple job. Our story begins with a simple phone call. Hey, Mom. Took you long enough to call, Lucas. I'm on a job, Mom. It doesn't lend much time to call. It doesn't change the fact that you need to call more. Sorry, Mom. So where are you? Los Angeles. Los Angeles? You aren't messing around at those dirty-ass casinos, are you? Hells no. You know my luck with gambling. I'm in old Los Angeles. Better, I suppose. Is that rain I hear? Yeah, it's been raining a bit since we landed. Are you at least wearing a raincoat? And I mean a proper raincoat, not that dingy rag you wear all the time. It works well enough, Ma. When you get home, use your money to buy a good raincoat. Or at the very least, a hat. I don't need a hat, Ma. It's not like I get sick anyway. It just means you are due to be sick. Now, promise me when you get this job over with, you will buy a hat. Fine. I will buy a stupid hat. Happy? Very. Now I won't keep you. Tell the others I said hi. I will. Love you, Mom. Love you too, dear. Those are the last words he exchanged with his mother before he turned off his cell phone. This is Lucas Kane, human, ex-IPD detective, freelancer. A bit of explanation on that last part. A freelancer is a term given to a person who performs services and duties beyond those of regular law enforcement. They are bodyguards, private investigators, bounty hunters, negotiators, etc. Whatever job is needed at the time, a freelancer does it for a modest fee, of course. And Lucas Kane is considered one of the best in the Empire. Hence why he is here on this deserted street across from an old hotel in the lovely area known as Old Los Angeles. Los Angeles is just like it sounds, an old part of Los Angeles that was formerly submerged beneath tons of seawater up until about 200 or so years ago when the city enacted the Los Angeles Renovation Initiative. The plan was to unflood the area to expand the city. Using a series of dams and irrigation systems, these parts of the city were brought back to life and began a series of urban renewals. Sadly, the area has since fallen on hard times and has since become a ghetto, a refuge for the worst of society. It is in this forgotten part of the most visited city in the Empire that Lucas Kane finds himself in. The rain beat upon his head, with him having nary a care. He ran his fingers through his locks, dull silver in color, slicking his hair back due to the rain. His old brown trench coat, the one his mother didn't like, did the job of keeping him relatively warm and dry. He placed his cell into his back jeans pocket next to his gun holster. A slight grimace appeared on his face. His large silver boots were caked in mud from the rain and dirt. One could see he didn't like the feeling of mud in his shoes, but there was no time for personal comfort. There was work to do. Next to him was a large black briefcase, much larger than the normal business-style case. His red eyes scanned the seemingly abandoned building in front of him, his mind at work planning the events that were to come in the next few minutes. Lucas reached into his jacket pocket to retrieve a pair of tinted goggles and wrap them around his neck. They would be needed in the plan later on. His hand reached up to his ear. It was then I caught sight of something in his ear akin to a hearing aid almost. Tapping the small object informed me that it was some type of communications device. This was correct as he began to speak into it in a lower tone of voice. Testing, 1, 2, 3, testing, 1, 2, 3. Anyone got their ears on? He muttered. The first voice to respond was that of a woman. This is Reese. I can hear you very clearly, Lucas Kane. The voice was calm, collected, and professional. It was borderline cold, but carried a hint of nobility and sophistication on the tip end. Glad to hear ya. You found a good spot? he asked, his eye casting an outward glance around in a vain attempt to catch sight of his partner. Thankfully for him, his eyesight is a little bit better than a human's. Zooming vision found the position of the woman in question, which was a couple of miles away on top of a building that had seen better days. Say hello to Miss Reese Fold, elf of 146 years, ancient by old world standards, still rather young for an elf. Her position was perfect as a sniper's nest, elevated, concealed from view, but with a perfect overview of the area. You could expect nothing less from one of the highest-ranked snipers in the Empire and a top graduate of the Callus Military Academy, one of the best military schools in the Empire. I could tell from her form was being somewhat hidden by her special cloak made from a fabric found and made only on the clear islands to the south of the mainland. It not only offered her protection from the elements, but its special fibers allowed it to bend the light and further blend into the environment, making her nearly invisible to the untrained eye. From her prone position, she held the deadly tool of her artistry, a Mark IV Alistair Magitech sniper rifle, custom built to fire 500 caliber impact rounds, which were strong enough to punch a hole through solid steel and still retain their shape. Her eyes gazed through the custom scope that gave her a perfect view of Lucas from over 5 miles away. She dubbed her weapon Whisper, due to the silencer equipped to it. Truly, this woman took exceptional pride in her craft. It was not easy finding a spot, she said. This area is not the best for proper sniping, though I do have you in sight. Good. Rain giving you any problems? Please. Her tone reeked of dismissal. I have worked in worse weather. He smirked at her comment. Always the professional, but that's why he enjoyed working with her. A little rain never bothered anyone anyway. That's what I like to hear, Reese. No problems with visibility? He asked. Nothing too troublesome. That anti-fog glass I bought was worth buying it for this. I have you in my sights, and while I'm at it, please refrain from scratching your bottom. A wide-eyed look of shock rolled on his rain-soaked face. You can see that? Unfortunately. A mischievous smirk grew on Lucas's face. At first he only did it because, well, he was a man. Men scratched their butts. But now, he did it to annoy her. Her voice took on a much colder edge as he spoke again. If you do not cease that horrific activity, I will shoot you in the head. Lucas turned in her general direction enough that his face fully appeared in her scope. Really? You'd shoot me in the face? Wrong head. She punctuated her threat by chambering around into whisper and making sure it was loud enough to be picked up in her earpiece. He outwardly paled, fairly certain her aim was now set squarely on his private area. She was dead serious about shooting him in the dick. She was as genuine as she was professional, and her threats were never threats for very long. Lucas removed his hand from his butt before speaking again. Yo, Thorgan, you on yet? The male voice that answered sounded like a tainted mix of Irish, Scottish, and 100-year-old whiskey that was left in an old basement by a one-eyed farmer in a bad mood. Aye, I hear ya. About time you got to me, the voice said incredulously. Well, you should have answered first, Lucas. Well, you should have answered first, Lucas explained. It's not my fault that I'm stuck trudging through these damnable sewers. Funny. I thought dwarves were at home in the filth of others, Reese chimed in. Oh, and is that the stossed tones of elven bitch I hear in me ear? Or is it the dying cries of an old yeti much past her prime? You would be best to watch your mouth, Thorgan Riffall, or I shall return your body to your family for a proper burial. Oh, thank you, lass. I'll make sure that when this is over, I'll give you a nice big hug. You will not make it 50 feet near me, dwarf. Guys! Lucas snapped, finally tiring of their back and forth bickering. I swear you two argue like an old married couple. Lucas's comment was met by a series of muttered curses in both Elvish and Dwarvish. That's not funny, lad. Not funny at all. For once, I agree with the dwarf. Do not make such a statement again. Lucas's gloved hand rubbed his forehead in distress from the back and forth between his partners. He'd almost find it hilarious if it wasn't so infuriating. Whatever, kill me later. I'll make out my will, he sighed. How long before you can get to position, Thor? He asked. The sloshing of dirty water and grunts of effort gave him an idea of the answer. There's a bit of work being done in the subway a while back. That gave me a bit of trouble getting past the blasted workers. Gave me about 10 minutes. I should be in position by then, Thorgan answered. And Mr. Fisher? Oh, he'll be ready to rumble when the time comes. And Groose? The dwarf groaned. You know how he is, lad. Last time I saw him, he was up and around Sunset Boulevard. I swear he's going to get in a heap of trouble if he keeps that up. He'll be here, bad habits aside, Lucas confidently said to their missing partner. All right, kiddies, it's serious time. We're going to play this one easy. Reese, you got my 6. Keep an eye on me at all times and a finger on the trigger. As the kids would say, I have your back, Lucas Kane. Thor, you set up the party favors. I want a nice fireworks display, bright and loud. Don't worry yourself, lad. When I'm done, it will look like bloody Empire Day had come early. That's what I like to hear, said Lucas as he reached down to pick up the black case next to him. Okay, it's showtime. Lucas walked across the rained-out streets towards the old, seemingly abandoned hotel. I say seemingly because, like myself, Lucas doubted that the building was abandoned as it seemed. I could almost hear his thoughts as he passed through the large metal fence that surrounded the property. Assess, plan, execute. That was the mantra he learned from his years as an IPD detective. It was drilled to him for years by his own father. Assess, plan, execute. Assess the situation. Learn all you can about your surroundings, your enemies, what they can do, and how well they can do it. Plan an appropriate strategy. Take what you've learned from your assessments and formulate a plan to achieve your goals. Execute the strategy. Activate the plan and perform it as quickly and as efficiently as possible. It was a part of his old occupation that he took to the life of a freelancer, and it translated very well. If it's not broken, why fix it? As his eyes scanned the area, Lucas was proceeding with the assessing part of his plan. He took note of the decently hidden protection runes on the interior edges of the fence that prevented surveillance, either electronic or mystical. Small remote cameras were dotted about the property, some even tracking his movements as soon as he walked into view. Beneath his feet, he felt the nearly unnoticeable hum and vibration of electricity running beneath the ground, meaning that there was power flowing in the area. And in his research of the place, this was supposed to be condemned. Thus, there wasn't any room for further doubt. This wasn't some random ramshackle wreck that they chose for this deal. No, this place was active. Either the other party fixed it up just enough for the trade, or it was already in such a state beforehand. He couldn't say either at this point. A plan was coming together in his head, but he still needed more information. Lucas arrived at the massive door of the hotel and knocked. His eyebrows scrunched together. The door didn't feel normal. It felt thicker, heavier than a door for this kind of building should have. It was reinforced, probably with titanium and something else, probably eternium. Either way, you need some serious firepower to make a dent to this kind of door. Another assessment. If the front of the door was reinforced, then most of the building was as well. Maybe all of it. He would have to amend his thinking as he explored more of it. Just as he finished his thought, a slat in the upper part of the door slid open, a pair of very angry eyes peering at Lucas. They were accompanied by a menacing, rumbling voice which spoke to him. "Who are you?" Deciding to keep things light, Lucas flipped the case under his palm onto the flat side. "Pizza delivery. I know it's a bit late, but you did ask for extra nesty, and that stuff takes a while to cook," he quipped with a grin. The eyes were not amused. The slat quickly shut before Lucas could hear the sounds of locks clicking out of place and clicking open. It swung open hard, revealing a rather large-looking humanoid with a red shirt, black hair, bronze skin, hairy cloven legs, and part of a horn sticking out from his forehead. He was a satyr. It really didn't surprise Lucas a bit. Satyrs were a common sight in the criminal underworld, as spiders were in an attic. And why wouldn't they be? Satyrs were the perfect hired guns, strong, tough, reliable, and not too smart to think of anything beyond the job, and the pay mostly consisted of booze and women. "That would be 19 dracs," he joked, sporting a winning smile. The satyr merely grunted distastefully at him while motioning him to enter. Walking into what he assumed was once the lobby, Lucas began to covertly assess the environment. 6 more satyrs were over by the front desk, huddled around a large TV watching the big EWA tag team match. There were at least 30 or more humans loitering around the building, some cleaning their guns while others were engaged in gambling. He could spot some playing demon dice. Another group was playing a rather heated game of New Texas Hold'em, with one of them winning a rather sizable pot of drachmas. There were weapons strewn about all over the place, from swords of varying lengths to handguns and assault rifles, some appearing to be ready and loaded. As he led through the lobby, the sound of disgusting slurps and munching caused him to cast a glance to the area that was once the dining area. Inside, he saw a large mass of sickening green sitting at a table with about 8 plates of food spread out. The creature, who seemed too big for the chair he was sitting in, was eating food by the handful, barely having enough time to breathe. This wasn't good. They had a cave troll, and a rather large one at that. Trolls were not native to the Empire. In fact, the only place in the New World where they could be found was the Wildlands, and it was rare to see even one of them anywhere else outside of their hides being displayed as some hunter's trophy. Trolls weighed enough to crush a car flat, strong enough to throw a bus, and were more likely to eat you than beat you to death, since they had legendarily voracious appetites. Looks like his research was right about the man behind this. Not only did he have the Drax to buy a troll, but he had the influence to get that big fellow past customs without raising any flags. This was unexpected, but it wasn't something beyond his ability to plan around. His horned host guided him to the elevator that was being guarded by a dark-skinned human, staring off into space with his eyes constantly shifting hues. Lucas's face frowned a bit. He was on flux. It was the newest designer drug that hit the streets about a year ago. It gave you a high much greater than that of Nero Coke, but the downside was it made you quicker to anger and totally paranoid, evidenced by the coloring of the eyes shifting from one hue to another. The human pressed the call button and the door slid open. "Not gonna frisk me?" he asked. "Not my job." "That's for upstairs," the goon droned, motioning him to enter the car with a drawn pistol. After giving the space a cursory glance, Lucas calmly walked in, not wanting to give this junkie any reason to be suspicious of him, and decided to put an impact round in his head. You're heading to the 7th floor. You don't get off on any floor but the 7th. The car is rigged with enough explosives to send you to the POV first class. And we got the car rigged with cameras, so don't get any funny ideas. You try to get off on another floor, we blow the car. You try to get out any other way, we blow the car. Hell, you even scratch your balls, we blow the car, he warned. "Now wait a damn minute," said Lucas. "I reserve the right to scratch my balls. It's my right as a man." The goon gave him a withering look, just as his eyes shifted from a deep purple to a light. The goon gave him a withering look as his eyes shifted from a deep blue to a light purple before punching the button, closing the doors. Lucas carefully ran his fingers through his hair as he felt the car shudder and move upwards. Outside of his previous action, he tried his best not to make any unnecessary movements with his arms or hands. Given what little he knew about the person he was about to make a deal with, he had to take special precautions and had to limit how much he moved inside the ascending car. He was thankful they didn't decide to be smart and check the case. That would put a major kink in his plans, which was taking shape as the minutes ticked by. The bell dinged, signaling his arrival at the designated floor. The door slid open, revealing a tall, well-dressed elf holding a rather large Magitech assault rifle. "Mr. Kane, we've been expecting you." Sorry, I was looking for water. He greeted with total politeness, motioning him with the barrel to exit. This floor was a world apart from the lobby downstairs. Nice new carpeting lay beneath his boots. The smell of fresh paint entered his lungs, and the doors on all the rooms were newly installed and of top quality. Hello, nurse, was all Lucas uttered as he took in his new surroundings. If he didn't know he was in one of the worst ghettos in the Empire, he could have sworn he was in a new hotel in downtown New Transylvania. This told him a lot about this boss. Not only was he careful and cautious, but he was also used to a certain high lifestyle. The gears in his head turned. His research was right on the money. The poke of the gun to his back woke him from his thoughts and told him to keep moving. His destination was the 7th room down from the hall of the elevator. On either side of it were 6 more elves, similarly dressed and armed like the one behind him. In front of the door was a small security table with another elf seated behind him. Behind him, from what he assumed, was a metal detector. Fortunately for him, the hidden earpiece on him was made of a type of plastic, all but undetectable by modern metal detectors. As long as they didn't physically search us here, they would be ignorant of its existence. Mr. Kane, greeted the seated elf. I see you found your way here safely. Directions were good, he quipped. Very good. So I take it that the case, he gestured towards the item, contains the money? Lucas brought the case up to eye level. That's right. 50 million drachmas. All new bills, totally untraceable. A pleased look rolled on the elf's face. Excellent. Now, if you will leave the money here with me, we will complete this transaction, and you'll be safely escorted out of the building. He spoke, reaching for the case, only for the human to pull it back sharply. No, I don't think so. The other gods, not liking his words or his actions, readied and cocked their rifles. Lucas eyed them all, feeling their hostile glares targeting his head, chest, and other vital areas of his body. There were 2 important facts that you need to know about elves in a situation like this. 2 facts that Lucas knew very well. 2 facts that would dictate what actions he would take in the next few seconds. 1. Elves were fast. Very fast. Unbelievably fast. Their reflexes and high hand speed were not to be underestimated in the least. Even compared to vampires and lycans, elves can outdraw the best of the best of those races. And humans, well, they aren't even in the conversation. 2, elves are very good shots, and that is an undersell on my part. Elves were commonly known to be the most accurate shots in the Empire. Didn't matter what type of weapon that was in their hands, pistols, rifles, knives, bows, and arrows. The fact remains that when an elf took aim at something or someone, they almost always hit their targets. Working closely with an elf all these years, Lucas knew very well how talented they were when it came to projectile weaponry. Now Lucas was in a quandary of sorts. He could draw his own weapon and probably take out 2, but maybe 3 of them, but if he was lucky. But 8? Armed with those rifles, it was a no-win situation for him. No, a gunfight was completely out of the question right now. The gears turned again. He would have to talk his way out of this, and hoped they fell for it. The seated elf's pleasant demeanor had turned cold as he eyed the human freelancer and placed a hand on his own sidearm. Mind repeating that again, Mr. Kane? Hey now, let's all be cool and calm. His hands were in front of him as not to appear threatening. And I will explain. He cleared his throat as he began his appeal. You see, I'm a freelancer. I know. Shocker. And guess what? I'm a pretty damn good one if you don't mind me saying so. Now I build up a certain reputation as one of the best. Why, you ask? Well, I tell you. Professionalism. As a freelancer, it's my duty to perform a job that I've been given to the best of my ability, and this one is not going to be any different. I've been hired to negotiate between 2 parties regarding the transfer of sums totaling 50 million drachmas, new bills, untraceable. He tapped the edge of the case and continued. From party A, i.e. my current employers, for the safe release and return of their son from the head of party B, i.e. your boss. You know what that means, right? The only way this cash is leaving my hands is only when I hand it over directly to your boss and not some security goon. He could see that while they hadn't lowered their weapons, they were understanding his reasoning. Lucas was on a roll. So let's hypothesize for a moment, shall we? Say I was to give this cash to you and it doesn't end up in his hands, either because you lost it between taking it from me and giving it to him, or you decided to go on a little shopping spree. What happens then? The goon said nothing as he continued. Everyone loses. Your boss loses 50 mils in cash, my employers lose their precious boy, and my reputation goes down the shiter. The seated elf began to tease, removing his own piece while sending glances at others. Lucas caught on to this and said, "Oh, please, don't even think about trying to take this from me. Because rest assured, if you tried, your boss will not see a single drac from me. And then it's you who has to explain to him why he didn't get his money. So, do you understand what I'm saying? Or should I break out the flashcards?" Lucas stared directly at the elf's face, not showing a single ounce of fear or intimidation. He couldn't afford to at this moment. They had to believe him. They must believe him. The whole job rested on it. For what seemed like an eternity, no one did a thing. The guards had their guns trained on Lucas, and he had his hard glare locked on the seated elf. Just then he noticed the grip on his gun relax a bit before sliding out of his jacket. His bluff had worked. "Fine. You win, Mr. Kane," he started, motioning for the others to lower their weapons. "You're free to see the boss, but you will still need to search you." "Of course," said Lucas. "We're all professionals here." The human raised his arms as the elf stood up and began to frisk him. Almost immediately, he discovered the two holstered pistols on either side of his waist. He smoothly removed them, holding one of them up to the light and eyed its design and contours with admiration. "Impressive," the elf commented. "Mark II Magitech revolvers. New Texas models, if I'm not mistaken." "You aren't. Right on the first try." Lucas smiled with that of a proud father when someone said something nice about his child. "Don't see these being used anymore. They're more museum pieces than anything else." The elf moved the gun around his hand, feeling the weight of the thing. "They got style," Lucas quipped. The Mark II Magitech revolvers were an older model of the standard handgun used today. It was occasionally used by a few law enforcement agencies within the Empire, specifically the New Texas Rangers. Nowadays, the Mark IIs were more showpieces than actual sidearms, but still plenty powerful due to the fact that they still used variable rounds as opposed to the impact rounds they use today. These puppies would fetch a good price at auction. "Yeah, true," he said. "But I'm going to get those back." The elf dismissed his comment as he placed the guns on the table. That is until Lucas slapped his palm down on to get his attention. "Seriously, I'm going to get those back." There was a deadly seriousness in his voice that the elf didn't ignore. There was nothing to suggest that he would truly get his guns back, but the look in his face was enough to tell him that it would be best that this man receive his firearms at the conclusion of this deal. Wordlessly, the well-dressed elf continued his search. In his cell phone in his pants pocket, a pack of gum in his back pocket, and a pack of High Wolf cigarettes in his coat pocket. Lucas's face balked. "Aw, man, not the smokes," he whined. "Can't be too careful. Come on, it's just a pack of smokes." Judging from the look on his face, his pleas were falling on deaf ears. "How about just a single? Can't hurt." The elf considered his request for a moment. Seeing no harm in it, he opened the new pack, removed a single stick of tobacco, and placed it comfortably in his coat pocket. Lucas's face broke into a wide, bright smile. "You are a pal." Thus ended his short pat down, allowing Lucas to pass through the metal detector with ease and to enter the room. Turning the knob, Lucas opened the door and walked in to find, not surprisingly, a room as well furnished and as immaculate as the rest of the floor behind him. There was another pair of guards on either side of the door, also very well dressed and similarly armed as the ones outside. There were a few nice paintings on either side of the walls, probably worth more than he was being paid for this job. As the door closed behind him, his eyes caught sight of the seal in between the walls. A piece falls into place for his plan. Ahead was a large, well-made desk trimmed in gold and a few fine decorations on the side. Yet again, something he more than likely couldn't afford. Behind the desk with his back to him, was an elf with black hair and a blue pinstripe suit, his eyes looking out the large window that not only gave him a great view of the ruined neighborhood, but an awesome view of new Los Angeles far in the distance. The elf smoothly turned to face him, a very expensive-looking earring dangling from one of his pointed ears. "Lucas Kane," he proclaimed. "Welcome! Right on time. Well, I like to be punctual, which I appreciate. Please." He extended his hand to the seat in front of the desk. Lucas took a seat offered to him, relaxing his posture as his host sat down. "I like the desk." "Do you? It's made from solid Ottawa oak, straight from the north. Very expensive." The human glided his gloved hand along the surface of the wood. "I can tell. Wish I had something like this in my office." The boss raised his eyebrow. "Really? The most famous freelancer in all the empire can't afford a desk like this?" Lucas gave a muted chuckle. "Just because I'm somewhat famous doesn't mean I'm rich." "Good point," he agreed. "Speaking of money..." His eyes drifted to the case next to him. You mean this?" Lucas asked, lifting the object up in question. "Yep, 50 million dracs per the agreement. And you will receive it once negotiations are finished between you and I." "Oh, really?" the elf asked, seating himself behind the very well-made desk. "And what's stopping me from, say, ordering my men to simply take it from you?" "Hypothetically?" The elf smirked, bridging his fingers together. "Of course. Then, hypothetically, you wouldn't get your money." "Please elaborate." Lucas held the object up in question higher up as he began his explanation. "You see, this here case? This isn't just some case I picked up at a gift shop on the way here. This was a custom job, made by a very talented dwarf I happen to know. It's a triple encoded lock system built on my own specs, handprint ID on the handle, password protected, and designed with multiple fail-safes to prevent anyone who isn't me from opening it. The handprint scanner not only won't ID any other hand but my own, but it has a nifty little bioreader. That means if my hand isn't attached to my body, it ain't opening. The password system also has a nice voice stress analyzer that can gauge my physical stress and health by the pitch and tone of my voice, meaning that unless I'm in perfect health and utterly stress-free, you're not getting into this baby. And lastly, if you try to just crack this bad boy open by any other means, the seams have pressure triggers on the edge. Anyone trying to pry it open would trip off a special surprise that will spray the contents with a highly corrosive acid that will turn anything inside of it, in this case money, into a mass of melted slag. So hypothetically speaking, if you take this from me, then you don't get paid." The elf absorbed this information as he was presented with. He had no reason to believe a single word of it, but Lucas Kane said it in such a way, despite his own reservations, the possibility of the validity of his claims could be just. His face was a stone wall of neutrality, hiding his thoughts over the subject. Eventually, he broke out into a small chuckle. "Very impressive, Mr. Kane," he started. "You certainly do live up to your reputation. The consummate professional." "It's what I do," Lucas spoke, placing the case next to his chair. "So then, shall we begin?" the elf asked. "Not just yet, my friend. You see, I have a question to ask." The elf raised his eyebrow in response to the statement. Now, Lucas was an inquisitive man by nature from his years on the NYIPD. Even more so after a decade had passed since he had hung up his badge and coat for the life of a freelancer, he still remained as inquisitive to a fault. If he had questions, he'd want answers. And if Lucas Kane wanted answers, he'll get them. "A question? Just a simple question." He looked at Lucas as an adult would look at a child who asked him where babies come from. Finally, he relented. "Ask away." Satisfied, Lucas relaxed his posture slightly before he spoke again. "Now, when we took this job, we did a little digging." The comment didn't even faze the elf, which Lucas expected. "What kind of digging?" "A lot. More than we usually do. When this place was announced as the negotiation site, we dug into it to see what this place was all about. I don't like entering situations like this without knowing some facts. Guess what we learned? His inquisition was met with the elf opening his palms to him, wordlessly saying for him to share what he had learned. This entire block was recently bought by the Wyndham Consolidated, a little property management based out of Alabama City. But here's the kicker. It's just a shell company. It doesn't exist, except on paper. Really now? The elf's smugness was apparent, but Lucas was no less deterred. Yep. Did more digging and found out that the company was owned by another company out of New Texas. Not surprising, it was another fake. One by one, we found over 10 separate fake companies, conglomerates, and corporations. Someone really wanted to cover their tracks about this. Indeed. A shame. Yeah. Or it would be. You see, my info girl, she's really good at finding out shit. Especially when it concerns a few misplaced checks the guy forgot to flush. The elf's smugness died a bit as Lucas continued. Took some doing, but we found him. Who did you find? He asked, less amused and more concerned. Elias Strife, ninth son of Albus Strife, second generation president of Strife Motors, the Empire's second leading producer of ether drives. It's said that every 1 out of 4 anything on 4 wheels has a Strife ether drive in it. Lucas leaned forward slightly. Thus we come to my question. If you're indeed Elias Strife, then why would someone as well off as you resort to kidnapping? Okay. The elf's face was a stony mix of silent frustration, indignation, and astonishment. Part of him was very much tempted to have this human killed, damning the money to preserve his concealment, but another part, the arrogant part, wanted to show off his brilliance and his cunning on this most dangerous of freelancers. A slow, deep chuckle erupted from his throat. My dear Mr. Kane, you are indeed very good at your job. And here I thought I did a better job covering my tracks. It's not your fault, Kane said. It's just that my team is very good at what I pay them to do. Strife rose from his seat and turned to the window, looking at the cityscape around him. Very well, Mr. Kane. I will answer your question with a question of my own. I'm all ears. The words that flowed from his mouth were dripping with self-feeding pride and arrogance that only those who deem themselves smarter than everyone else would have. Does the name Trigger Orgoff mean anything to you? A look of quizzical recognition slid on Lucas's face. The Iron Midget? Who hasn't? He answered. The guy was one of the biggest crime bosses in the Empire. Said he controlled every bit of crime from here to the Alaskan Islands. Correct, Strife replied. And I take it you know what happened to him 2 months ago? Yeah, the guy was gunned down at his favorite bar. Heard he was so full of holes you could read a newspaper through his corpse. Correct again. And right now, across the city, a gang war is raging. All of his lieutenants clashing over who will control his vast criminal organization. A battle for the crown, all because of one dead dwarf. I know all of that, Kane started. But what's that have to do with this? He turned dramatically around to Lucas. All of it, he exclaimed. You see, people see crime as something that only the desperate do when they say, sorry. You see, people see crime as something only the desperate do, but the way I see it, crime is just another name for business. Think about it. Different products to sell, different services to offer, buyouts, investments, product quality, and the most hostile of hostile takeovers. Right now, out there, the board of directors are fighting over a company that is now rudderless without its CEO. And what I'm doing is simply filling the void. Lucas's face began to morph from a look of inquisition to that of slow understanding and realization. All the pieces had fallen into place. Now I get it, he started. The building, the guns, the goons downstairs, the cave troll, the extra security rooms. You're building an army to take his place. There you go, Strife said with a smile. Before you ask the inevitable question of why I want to take over his organization if I'm rich already, I will simply answer with this. I'm not as rich as you think I am. The freelancer's eyebrow raised in almost disbelief, earning a small chuckle from his host. Rest assured, my friend, my family is quite wealthy. Myself, not so much. You see, my siblings and I receive a monthly allowance that is more than the average person would make in a year, but still not enough to say that I am rich. My father encourages us to make our own way in the world instead of relying on his vast fortune. When the Iron Midget died, I saw my opportunity to carve out my own fortune. But with the money he was giving me was far from enough for my own plans, and I couldn't risk asking my father for more without giving away what I was planning. Hence the money, Lucas added. That 50 million drachmas will act as the seed money for my conquest of the criminal world. With it, I can buy the loyalty of the lower street gangs in the city, increasing my ranks, and those I can't buy out, I'll simply remove them from the equation. Thanks to my contracts with the arms industry, I can equip my men with better firearms than the meager pop guns my rivals are using. And the cave troll? I know a few higher-up overseers in customs who would look the other way. Smuggling a cave troll into this country is very easy, he explained. With that money, by the end of the month, I will be a major player in this little war. Within 2 months, I'll have full control of the city. And by the end of the year, I will have conquered the midget's former empire and made it my own. And no one would be the wiser. Yes, I'll spread rumors and stories about the new boss of the East Coast in the streets. I'll have the cops chasing shadows and mists for years. All the while, I'll bask in my new wealth and power. I had to admit, it's an ambitious and impressive little plan, Lucas said. I'd be more impressed if he hadn't felt the need to snatch a kid from his parents. That being said, he started to take his seat again. Now that you know my plans, what do you intend to do about it? The question had a slight effect on the human. I could see in Lucas's face a look of... Well, no single word could accurately describe the look. I'd say it was akin to him wanting to reach across the desk and punch the arrogant elf in the face, job be damned. I don't know if Strife could see this look, but recognize it for what it was or not, but I know for sure that it was a tempting prospect for our dear friend Lucas. The look passed as fastly as it arrived, as Lucas took a more relaxed posture. If I was still a cop, I'd bust your ass faster than you can blink. But, he started, I'm not a cop anymore. This is my job now. I'm here to give you your money and bring the kid back to his parents. The cops can handle you, if they can. A wide grin erupted on Strife's face. Good answer. I like people who don't ask too many questions. Now, with that out of the way, just hand me the money and first bring in the kid. His quick statement clearly caught the elf off guard. I'm sorry? The kid. Bring him in here. What makes you think he's in here? Oh, please, said Lucas. You're a businessman. You wouldn't want to keep an asset like him somewhere where you can't keep a solid eye on him. You wouldn't want someone else taking him, or one of your goons deciding to get smart and hide the kid to goose you out of the money. Also, he leaned in closer for this next bit. I've been around his kind my whole life. I know the smell very well, and despite how this room looks, it reeks of him. So why don't you stop playing stupid games and bring the kid in here? As Lucas leaned back in his seat, it was clear to anyone, me included, that Strife was once again sussed out by this human. He would probably admire the guy if what he was planning for months didn't hinge on the money what he was getting. He reached into his pocket and pulled out a small cell phone. Dialing the number, he said something in Elvish. I can tell you right now that Lucas didn't speak or understand the language. He never took the time or effort to learn it, even though he works with an elf himself. I, on the other hand, can understand it. All he was saying was bring him in before turning the device off. A few seconds later, the rattle of a doorknob called the elf and human's attention to another well-dressed elf entering the room. In his arms was a small silver-furred puppy, although it wasn't a puppy really. It was a baby lichen, a very young one at that. Its age was clear to Lucas, since very young lichens haven't mastered the ability to shift between wolf and man, making them look like puppies to the uninformed observer. Poor thing looked utterly frightened, but otherwise okay. This was the last piece that Lucas needed for his plan. Now he could begin. Satisfied, Mr. Kane? Strife asked. Lucas turned back to him, reaching into his jacket pocket to retrieve the lone cigarette he was allowed. More than enough. Now we can complete this little transaction. He held the tobacco stick between his fingers. Got a light? Ever the good host, Strife retrieved his gold-plated lighter from his desk drawer and gave the light he wanted. He took a long drag of it, inhaling the smoke into his lungs, causing him to violently cough in reaction. So, the money for the kid? He choked out between fits of coughs and hacks. We have an agreement. Even though he got his money, the elf started to feel a bit bad for Lucas, who seemed to be on the verge of passing out. A word of friendly advice, Mr. Kane. You might want to think about quitting. I don't think you can handle smoking anymore. Lucas let out a laugh, or something that could be called a laugh. I couldn't really call it tell due to the coughing. You know, it's kind of funny. And why is that? Because I don't smoke. Before anyone else in the room could process the meaning of his statement, Lucas flipped the bud into the air. He quickly slipped on his goggles around his neck, just as the cigarette exploded into a green flash of light, blinding the elves. Lucas picked his spot and acted, and act he did. He moved a lot faster than a lot of people would believe he was capable of. In fact, I actually had to pull out a watch just to time it all. 0.5 seconds. Lucas grabs the edge of the table and flips it up into Strife's face. 1 second. Lucas jumps from his chair and advances upon the leftmost guard. He grabs the barrel of his gun with his left hand, smashing him in the jaw with a perfectly delivered elbow strike. He is unconscious. 1.5 seconds. Twisting the rifle around in his hand, he turns it into a makeshift club, laying a solid blow with the butt of the rightmost guard. He is unconscious. 2 seconds. He slides the magazine out and throws it into the last guard's face. Dazed and confused, he is unable to react when Lucas advances over to deliver a painful-looking headbutt. He is unconscious. 2.5 seconds. Lucas turns his attention to the desk and what he could imagine is a very befuddled Strife. He jumps over with a very impressive-looking Superman punch, his fist blowing through the expensive wood and finds its home to the jaws of the elf's exposed chin. He is unconscious. Total time? 6.5 seconds. Removing his goggles, he surveyed the room, full of unconscious elves and one very shaken lichen pup on the floor. He leaned down to check in on him, to have the poor thing whimper and shy away from him. Hey, shh, he said in a gentle hushed tones. I'm a friend. I'm here to take you home to your parents. Upon hearing the prospect of seeing his family again, he instantly perked up. Lucas scratched behind the cub's ear, getting him to relax and trust him. He looked over at the semi-smashed table and retrieved his case. Okay, kiddo, this is going to be a bit scary and cramped, but you'll be safe in here. Lucas popped open the case to reveal nothing. Not a single drachma to be found, but more than enough room for a young lichen cub. Warily, the cub sniffed the inside of it before carefully crawling inside. Lucas gave the youngster a quick thumbs up before closing the top. Reese, you got me? He asked into his earpiece. I saw everything. You could have been faster. Well, I'm sorry I didn't kick ass fast enough for you. And your mother was right. You really should invest in the hat. If we can move along, he said between gritted teeth. How's it looking outside? The sniper changed her scope to the setting of thermal, allowing her to view the body heat of the guards outside, all who seemingly were unaware of what happened in the room. The guards seemed clueless. I thought so, he said. I noticed the layers between the doors. The whole room is soundproof. But our dear prince here didn't want anyone listening in on any of his business transactions. A wise precaution. What now? Well, I need to get out of here and get my guns back. Can you take care of those guys? Please duck your head and do not get up until I tell you to. He certainly did as he was told. This was what Lucas calls Reese's shoot mode, where she wholly focused on the task of sniping and killing those she deemed no longer deserving the gift of life. And when she's like this, it's best not to interrupt her. He still had the scar on his right ear from one such incident. Loading the first round into the large magazine of Whisper, she took solid aim at the seated heat signature. He would be first. Squeezing the trigger, the round erupted from the barrel, traveling through the rain and the wind over several miles, punched through the glass window, pierced the door, and found a home in the neck of the target. From the perspective of the other 7 men, the only thing they would have likely heard was a muffled grunt from their compatriot. It would have been the last thing they would hear. With cold efficiency, she let loose 7 more shots, each making 7 holes in 7 heads, ending 7 lives. Just like that, 7 elves were killed and had no idea the identity of their killer. This was Reese Fold, and this is why she was the best sniper in the Empire. And Lucas could not be happier. You may rise. The human did as he was told, peeking his head and eyed the holes in the walls and the window. My dear, you are a beast! Indeed, she replied as she reloaded Whisper. Case in hand, Lucas walked out of the room, coming across the bloody remains of the hosts. He gathered up his belongings from the table, chief among them being his 2 pistols. Told you I'd get these back, he said to the corpse of the formerly seated elf as he holstered his guns. I wouldn't celebrate just yet, Lucas Kane. What's up? His tone was much more serious to match the sudden urgent tone of the sniper. I am seeing a mass of heat signatures coming up from the stairs very fast. I think someone must have triggered a silent alarm. Shit! How long before they get here? 2 minutes, max. God, I love pressure, he muttered. Okay, Thor, where are you? I'm in the basement, said the dwarf. Just cleaned up some rats. I'm waiting for you, lad. Good. And Groose? Just talk to him. He'll be here in 5 minutes. Well, that's cutting it close. All right, Reese, you're gonna have to guide me down. I don't really want to get into a gunfight right now. Understood. There is an empty room 5 doors down from your current position. Go now. Gotcha. Lucas fast walked his way to the free room, breaking the lock to get in. He quickly shut the door behind him, his back leaning against the wood. After a minute or so, the sound of angry shouts and running filled the hallway. When I say so, head for the stairs. Lucas tightened the grip on the case and readied himself to move as fast and as quietly as possible. Now. With the same swiftness he showed in the room, he snapped the door open and glided into the hall. He caught sight of a mass of goons around the office and the dead bodies. He didn't have time to wait around to see what they were planning. He launched himself through the door and dashed down the stairs. All he had to do was get to the basement and hope... Sorry about that. All he had to do was get to the basement and hope he didn't run into anyone. 5 hostiles coming up. Get off on the 5th floor. He complied without a word of complaint. The 5th floor was not as well made as the 7th floor. Not that he cared. He just wanted not to run into anyone. There was another stairway at the end of the hall. Move now. His pace quickened, but not into a run. He didn't need to waste his energy needlessly. He just wanted his luck to hold out. Sadly, the gods are not that kind. What the? It was from a human goon. He emerged by chance from the fourth floor room from the fourth room from the stairs. He had come to this room to toke up on his stash of elven weed that he had bought off one of the guards. That was until he got word on his radio to look for the human freelancer who attacked the boss and killed 7 guards. He was reluctantly on his way down to join the search when he just happened upon said human freelancer. Lucas's reflexes kicked in as his right hand blurred to his revolver and pointed straight at the hapless man. Now remember when I said that these guns were special because they used variable rounds? This was a perfect moment to explain what they are. Variable rounds are named due to the enchantment placed upon the shell casing. They were able to change the type of ammunition fired from them, depending on the chant that the user said before he fired. And Lucas was about to show this poor victim one of those types. Aria! He pulled the trigger, and instead of a bullet, what came out of the barrel was a massive gust of wind. The man was blown back into the room and out of the window, joined by bits of wood, furniture, and glass. Damn it! Lucas cursed to himself. You should be mad. That little display has alerted the others to your position. I kinda got that! His comment was directed towards the arrival of 2 more goons, guns drawn and ready. Fira! He fired a round at the two, this time taking the form of a blast of fire. One of them ducked into the stairway. The other was not so lucky. The sound of 3 more goons coming from the other end caused Lucas to whip his head around. He fired again, unleashing yet another torrent of fire at his aggressors. Unfortunately, they were fast enough to retreat out into an open room, avoiding the flames. The dual wall of crimson fire gave him a brief barrier against the small army rallying against him, although it didn't stop them from firing rounds blindly at him. He dove back into the ruined room. The sound of impact rounds landed around him and near him. "Lucas, we have a problem," said Reese, as calm as ever. "More so than this?" he yelled over the sound of gunfire. "The other half of their force are covering the lobby. I believe they thought you'd be making your way down there to exit via the front door. Even if you get to the stairs, you will be outnumbered and outgunned." "I love good news," said a very sarcastic Lucas Kane. "So I'm out of options?" "As far as I can see." "Wait!" Thor was the one who spoke up. "I think I found a way for you. You said you're on the 5th floor, right?" "Yep." "Good. I saw the blueprint to this place like you told me. If you can get to the 2nd floor, there should be a small laundry chute in the hallway. If you can jump into that, it'll take you straight to me." "Sounds like a plan. Now for us to get in there, I don't know." His speech was cut off as he began to formulate another plan in his head. "Please give me some cover." "Of course. What will you do?" she asked, unloading a couple of rounds into some hostiles. "Making my own stairs." He cocked his gun as he pointed it towards the center of the room. "Gravita!" The round he fired was small and purple, but soon expanded to the size of a small car. The mass dropped into the floor, pushing a hole through it. Not wasting another second, he dove to the floor and landed on the room beneath him. He fired again, creating another gap in the hole for him to jump through. With the last round, he repeated the action, giving him the exit he needed to the 2nd floor, thankfully clear of enemies. Dusting himself off, he walked out of the room into a very empty hallway and began to look for the laundry chute. The sound of gunfire seemed to die down from above, meaning they probably know he isn't up there anymore. Urgency rushed his search. Just as the sounds of stomping footsteps closed in on him, he spotted the rusty hatch of the chute right next to the elevator. He rushed towards it. He cursed himself as he yanked the rusted hatch open. His face scrunched up as he looked down the dark crevice leading to his next destination. No time to be picky. He popped open the top of the case to see the pup, a bit ruffled but otherwise okay. "Hang on to your tail, kiddo. This next part's gonna suck." The cub didn't have time to wonder what he meant before the lid was shut again. Lucas dropped the case down the shaft, hoping that the lone passenger wouldn't have too much of a hard ride. The steps were getting closer. There was no real time to think. The human jumped headfirst into the chute, not caring how rough the trip would be for him. If anyone happened to be next to the chute, they would probably laugh at themselves at the various curses and expletives the 37-year-old shouted as he bumped and bashed his way down the metal shaft, completely at the mercy of gravity. He finally landed with a pronounced thud into an old laundry bin, minus the laundry, which probably could have used to soften his landing. I don't want to do that ever again, Mommy." "Nice trip you have?" Lucas cast a sour glare at the grinning form of his diminutive partner, Thorgan Riffall. The dwarf looked no worse for wear, considering how he arrived and such. His faded red jacket had spots of dirt and filth patched all over it, as was his favorite cap from his favorite baseball team, the Baltimore Saltines. His long jean shorts had a few rips and tears in them, more so than normal. His favorite blue sneakers were caked in mud and other things that I don't think are mud. He nevertheless found the effort to smile cocky as ever, with his blonde goatee in such a rough condition. "Watch what you say, or I'll pull out my old dwarf tossing skills." "Oh, talk." Lucas climbed out of the bin, groaning at the fresh bruises that he had more than likely have by the time his job was over. "You got the package?" Thorgan gestured to the case next to him. "Get out of the way before your glorious entrance." Lucas chose to ignore the comment as he popped open the case to check on his charge. To his relief, the puppy was fine and seemingly happy. "Oh, look at the little wee one," he cooed. Thorgan cooed. "He's a cute one, isn't he?" It reminds me of me dog back in Roost. Lucas looked at Thorgan with horror. Moogie? He reminds you of Moogie? Yes. Moogie is ugly, he said incredulously. Thorgan's beloved dog was a breed known as a Rustian Bulldog, a large, hardy breed of canine known for its size, fierce loyalty, and unquestioned strength. The trade-off was that the Rustian Bulldog wasn't exactly attractive to anyone outside of dwarves. In fact, in a recent poll of the populace, it was found that 76% of the people firmly believe that the Rustian Bulldog was the ugliest breed of dog in the Empire. Moogie is not ugly, Thorgan shot back. He's got character. Reese, even in the midst of sniping, decided to throw in her 2 cents. Lucas is right. Your dog is as ugly as Sin, and you should be ashamed of yourself for comparing the two. Or you'll be ugly as Sin when I get me hands on your lass. The human side of himself as the two began one of their usual bickering matches. Enough, you two, he ordered, massaging the bridge of his nose. Where's Mr. Fisher? Thor cracked a grin in his question. Over there, he answered. Ready and waiting. He caught sight of Mr. Fisher leaning again next to an old washing machine. In this case, Mr. Fisher was not a person. It was a long black bokken, or wooden sword for the uneducated. It was made of a special type of Alaskan cedar oak, very sturdy and thick, in some ways stronger than a regular steel sword. As for the name, Lucas named it after a trader at the academy, a Captain Alex Fisher. According to Lucas, the sword was just like him, large, black, and busted heads if you pissed him off. He took the sword by the white ribbon covering the handle, swinging it around to readjust its weight. Old friend, it's time to bust some heads. So what's the plan now, lad? Asked the dwarf. Getting there. Reese, how's it looking up top? There was a slight pause before she answered, likely taking a head count of her foes. They're searching downward, but I do not believe they know your exact location as of yet. Groovy. Thor, he replied. Party favors are set and ready to go. Gravy. Okay, we need to get to the lobby and hold on until Goose gets here. If he says he's coming, he ordered. Reese, get your elven ass down here. I'm gonna need you closer when the fun starts. Moving. I got the kid. You ready for this, bud? Oh, sorry about that. I got the kid. You ready for this, bud? Thorgan reached into his large backpack and pulled out something that looked like a small rod. With a twist, it doubled in length to a more recognizable shape of a shotgun. The Mark V roundhouse collapsible shotgun was Thorgan's favorite weapon to use, mainly because it was so much like him. Small in size, but packs a punch. Always ready for this, lad, he punctuated his answer with a nice loud cock of his gun. Rowdy. You know the way? Just gotta go through the boiler room, cut through the second laundry, small hallway, dash through the kitchen, and we're there. Good. You take point. Oh, your mum was right. Just break down and buy a bloody hat. Just get moving, dwarf. The dwarf nodded in agreement and headed out the door of the boiler room. He kicked open the door with his small legs and casually walked in. Lucas was about to admonish him for going into a room without properly checking, but it died the moment he followed him in. There were 5 dead bodies around the room, 2 humans and 3 satyrs. 4 of them had been shot to death. The 5th one's face was beaten to an almost unrecognizable mesh of bones, teeth, horns, blood, and vomit. The rats? Aye. Pretty damn big ones, too. The duo passed over the bodies and into the small hallway that led to the kitchen. This is one of the few rooms in the whole building that was still active to provide meals to Stripe's growing criminal army. Neither of them knew this, or they would have predicted the presence of 3 more satyrs, snacking on some bread. Said bread was dropped as they caught sight of the duo and aimed their guns. "Oh, bloody hell!" shouted Thor as the 2 of them dove behind the counter, a hail of bullets raining over them. Through the noise, Lucas could hear the sound of one of them radioing for backup. Things were about to get crowded. Setting the case down, he drew his fully loaded revolver and unleashed a few fire rounds at them. Thor popped a few rounds from his shotgun while shouting like an insane madman. "Come on, you bastards! I have better aim when I'm taking a piss!" he roared between his shots. This is what Lucas referred to as Thor's insult foo. During fights like this, he would often shout, curse, throw insults, and just generally do everything he can to piss off his enemies. In his own words, an angry enemy is a sloppy enemy, and a sloppy enemy is a dead enemy. Lucas could almost laugh at the other insane things the dwarf was yelling between shots. Ah, come on, you whores! Get your balls up! Me grandma can shoot better than a lot of ya, and she's dead! Why don't you get your mothers to shoot for you? Oh, wait, she can't. She's too dead tired from me giving it to her last night. You son of a bitch! One of the satyrs roared, much to Thor's delight. Giving in to his mage, the man rushed and charged them head on. Thor popped over the counter and shot him full of buckshot, dropping him stone dead. Just as Lucas was reloading, one of the satyrs rushed over to get a bead on him, point blank. Reacting quickly, he chopped the gun out of his hand, but losing his own gun in the process. The satyr jacked him up against the wall in a violent chokehold. Thor would have helped him, but the other satyr was on him, and his shotgun was dry. What now, you loudmouth midget? Thor said nothing before sliding a riot baton out of the sleeve of his jacket and cracking him in the knee. The offender growled in pain as he dropped to his knees and into Thor's range. The dwarf smashed his jaw with a right cross. He followed up with a knee strike to his nose, putting him down for good. Lucas had his hands full with his foe, losing oxygen fast from his grip. Desperate, he grabbed onto one of the horns and snapped it off. In mind-numbing pain, the satyr dropped him back before staggering. Taking the chance, he stabbed the beast with its own horn in the chest, killing it stone dead. He coughed up a bit, trying to catch his breath as he holstered his gun and retrieved his sword and case. He looked over at Thor, reloading his gun. They nodded at each other before heading towards the exit. Lucas caught sight of two more men coming around the door. He flew over with a kick, rocking the door off its hinges and onto the two. One was out cold. The other tried to get up. Lucas silenced him with a quick slash of Mr. Fisher, my bad. Not missing a beat, he ran down the hallway. It was when he rounded the corner that he noticed his small partner was noticeably absent. Just as he was about to call out to him, the dwarf scuttled around the corner, shotgun in hand. What kept you? Oh, you know. The sound of an approaching mob from around the corner filled their ears. Lucas would have drawn his gun for a firefight, only for the massive mob to be taken out by a massive explosion. Rat traps. Thor smiled as he ran ahead. Lucas shook his head as he followed behind. After a few frantic minutes of running, they found themselves in what could be called the employee break room. Fortunately, it was empty. Lucas peeked out of the door, leading to their destination. The lobby wasn't crowded as when he originally entered, but there were still 10 very trigger-happy men lounging about, muttering to each other about what they'd do to that fucker Kane. A lot of rats in there, he reported to his partner. Oh, I got something for that, lad. He reached into his seemingly bottomless backpack and pulled out a very nasty-looking grenade. A ripper? Lucas said. This is gonna suck for them. Thorgan took position on the opposite end side of the door from Lucas. The human grabbed the doorknob while the dwarf pulled the pin of the grenade. Drake! Drake! Irsk! He counted in Dwarvish. At 0, he pulled the pin and opened the door for Thorgan and threw the explosive into the lobby. Shutting it fast, they took cover away from the door as the gathered men in questioned what the hell was this small little object that came out of thin air. I doubt they had time to realize the danger they were in before it exploded. The blast blew the door off its hinges and onto the floor. There were thousands of little small spears embedded in the wood. As they looked into the chaos, they saw all the men were on the ground, either dead or in extreme pain from the multitude of spear shrapnel. They learned why Thorgan called it a ripper grenade. The duo walked into the painful mayhem they had created, stepping over the dead and the dying bodies of their foes. That was a lot easier than Lucas's statement was cut short by the arrival of 5 more goons. Oh, shit. With the bullets whizzing past them, they launched themselves behind the former sign-in desk. Lucas cursed to himself when he realized he was out of ammo as he tried to fire back. I'm out! He yelled over the cacophony of gunfire. Here! The dwarf tossed him a small sack of variable rounds before taunting and firing back at his oppressors. Opting not to use both guns, he only reloaded one before joining in on the gun battle. He dropped 3 more men with fire rounds next to Thorgan's 4 with his shotgun. Sadly, their kills weren't doing much, as they were getting more backup from men upstairs. By the time Lucas had emptied his gun, there were now 14 gunmen firing on their position. The firing had gotten so fierce that both of them couldn't return fire without taking a shot or two themselves. "I'm thinking we'll be in a bit of small trouble, Luke," Thor yelled over the gunfire. "Nah, all part of the plan," he replied. He reloaded his revolver, ready to take down a few punks until the wave of bullets came to a sudden end. The two men shared a look before peeking over the counter. In front of the mob was Elias Strife, dirty and holding a bloody nose. He was not in a very good mood. "Mr. Kane!" he roared. Gone was the civilized and elegant criminal mastermind. He was hurting, embarrassed, shamed, and absolutely livid. "Hey there, buddy!" And Lucas was going to make him all the more unhinged. "Looks like you aren't having a good night." "I have to admit, Mr. Kane," he angrily spat, "that was a very bold tactic you employed. You killed most of my men, disturbed my operations, destroyed my desk, and broke my nose." "It's a bit of an improvement. I admire your bravado if it wasn't so infuriated, but I'm willing to give you some measure of mercy if you return what is mine." "Your pride?" Thor yelled back. "Nah, you lost that a long time ago, sunshine." "The boy!" What little patience Strife had was quickly running out. "Give me the boy." Lucas chuckled to himself. "The boy was never yours, asshole. I can't give you back what you never had." The elf boss snorted as he snapped his fingers. On command, a set of thunderous footsteps heralded the arrival of the one being in the whole building Lucas did not want to have to deal with personally. The cave troll walked next to Strife, club in hand and looking very ready to commit murder. "You have 1 minute, Mr. Kane, to return the boy to me, or I will send this troll over to rip you and that dirty little dwarf to pieces." Thorgan popped up. "Just try it, you punts! I'll rip his balls off and feed them to you, and that's after I ram your heads up his big green arse." Lucas gave a loud, taunting belly laugh. "I wanted to agree with him. No dice." It was the elf's turn to laugh, almost incredulously. "You think you can win? You're outnumbered, outgunned. I have more men upstairs, and lest you forget, a cave troll. What do you have?" It seems the gods wanted to say they were sorry for earlier, for just as he finished that question, something large and heavy slammed into the ceiling. The sound of small gun arms fire and horrifying screams filled the air. The men upstairs seemed to be fighting something and losing. With each passing second, the screams grew louder, more frantic, and fewer in number. Mixed into this with the sounds of something roaring and growling in some kind of language that neither Strife nor his men could understand. All the while, they were frozen in morbid fascination and exciting fear. "No!" was yelled before a body of a satyr crashed through the ceiling and landed on the ground in a mangled heap. The screams were now louder, as the sound of bodies and furniture being thrown about the room from a room above. Behind the mob, another body crashed through, same as the first. The sickening sounds of bones breaking echoed throughout the room. Just then, a human scrambled out of the first hole, desperately trying to seek safety from the Armageddon happening up there. Just as it seemed like he would escape from the unseen terror, his face screwed into one of absolute terror. No, gods, please, no!" he begged as he was dragged back up. His screams were silenced by what sounded like his body being broken, for the lack of a better term. Then there was nothing. The screams had died out. The only sound left was heavy breathing and stomping footsteps. Before anyone could say anything, the ceiling in front of the sign-in desk crashed down. From the rubble arose a mass of fur and bloodlust. "What do we have?" Lucas spoke, smiling widely. "We have Groose." This mountain of mayhem was Groose. Undetermined age, height 8'7", weighed 566 pounds, and he was a Sasquatch. The mob of men shrank back in both surprise and fear of the Titan before them. It's understandable, of course. Anyone who first meets Groose can find him the most intimidating. His fur-covered face was hard and stern, gold eyes filled with violence. His bottom canine tooth stuck up and out of his large mouth, one of which was chipped, which seemed to have add to his imposing presence. The hair covering his broad chest was long, thick forearms that looked like they could have struck off a missile strike. The only bit of clothing he wore were a pair of blue jean shorts that didn't seem to really fit him, and on his back was something that looked like a long rifle, but why would someone like this guy ever need a weapon? They would never know. What took you so long? Now your knives are not messing with you. That is the language of the Sasquatch called Sasquatch. It is a rough and complex tongue which almost everyone in the Empire, including myself, can understand. If that's true, then why not do I simply translate it for you? It's quite simple. They don't like others to really speak it. It's nothing to do with Sasquatches not wanting other races to speak it. It's just to them, anyone who speaks it sounds horribly stilted and mangled. Even the best linguists in the New World can't properly speak Sasquatch to save their lives. Instead, it was just easier for everyone if they merely understood the language, but not speak it. And since Sasquatches can understand a lot of languages, there was no need for them to deviate from their own. You were doing that again, weren't you? Lucas said. Norema, Matachaki! He pleaded almost like a child would before an angry parent. Yes, Lord, Thorgan chimed in. He was doing that again. Norema! You're gonna catch something if you keep doing that. While the trio were busy discussing Groos's personal habits, the mob was frozen in fear, save for Strife and his cave troll. What are you fools doing? The elf said. Get them! But his orders fell on deaf ears. His men, the baddest he could find, were just stone statues before the form of Groos. But that's Groos, one of them said. Yeah, I heard about him. He's the one who messed up those boys in the Great Lakes, another said. I heard about that. They said he killed so many of them that the lake was blood red for a week. The terror amongst them was at an all-time high. They had heard stories and rumors about this guy. They knew what happened to people who got on the wrong side of Groos. They didn't know what he was. What they did know that he was on Lucas Kane's payroll. The only one who didn't know these stories was Strife himself. He's just a hairy ape. Now there's nothing to fear. He had 20 guys up there, all armed to the teeth, and he killed them all. Boss, let's let them go. I don't want to get ripped apart. The morale of his men was shrinking and dying right before his eyes. Anyone else would have known the stories, would have taken the advice, and gotten as far away from this murder machine as possible. Sadly, Elias Strife wasn't anyone else. His eyes filled with indignation, he motioned his fingers at the troll. Go. Kill. That was all the troll needed to hear. Like I said, they weren't very smart, but when told to kill, they killed. The mass of green smiled a disgustingly slobbery smile as he began to advance. Lucas was the first to notice this. Think you can handle him, buddy? He gestured towards the troll. Groos stretched his jaw a bit, cracked his neck, and rotated his shoulders. Jay, he replied before heading off to meet his opponent. Now I feel the need to tell you that a Sasquatch versus a cave troll is a mismatch against the Sasquatch. The trolls were bigger and stronger than any Sasquatch. In fact, a troll versus Sasquatch match is no more of a fair fight than a troll versus a human. But then again, this is Groos we're talking about. The two titans stomped towards each other, neither showing any signs of backing down until they were inches apart. The troll had at least 2 feet on him and another 200 pounds over him. It's one of the few times Groos actually look up to an opponent. But even as the troll snarled, slobbering ooze from his mouth, Groos was unmoved. There was not a single speck of fear, doubt, or intimidation in his eyes or body. All that was coming off of him was a strong urge to beat respect into this creature. Shumasa Shimata Nechi Hakmos Se Action for Blah, he threatened. Or at least that's what I assume was a threat, jabbering his finger into his skin. The troll, neither caring or understanding what he said, simply reeled back his massive open left hand and hit him with something that was less of a slap and more of an open-handed punch. The shock of the blow was enough to shake the windows and rumble the ground. Stripe smiled smugly at the results of his investments. I mean, such a blow could kill a vampire, a lichen, or a human. But then again, this is Groose we're talking about. Not only was he still alive, he wasn't even off his feet. His body just leaned over from the force of the hit. He slowly righted his posture, rubbing the side of his face as he did. He merely nodded a bit before he spoke again. Shalmita. Before anyone could blink, Groose tackled the troll, full speed, pushing him back through the mob. The men scattered out of the way as the hairy beast began to lay into the haymakers into its body. The troll countered by swinging its club, but Groose ducked it, countered with some quick jabs to its massive gut. It swung its club again. This time, Groose caught it with one hand and gave his forearm a nice punch. The blows caused it to lose its grip on the weapon, which it was now in Groose's hairy hand. Taking one look at the club, he shook his head and snapped it in half like a toothpick before punching it in the face. The troll staggered backwards, hurt and shocked, while the Sasquatch merely advanced upon him, ready to dish out more punishment. I can imagine the thought process of the troll. This particular troll had always thought it was pretty damn tough, having survived the outwilds of Australia for all its life. Dozens of trolls and goblins and other things that humans didn't even know existed tried to take it. They all failed. Nothing was as strong as it. Then there was this small, hairy thing, this Groose. He was beating it so easily. This was unthinkable. He was bigger. He should be winning. It was around this time that both the troll and Strife finally started to realize why the men were so damn terrified of him. This was what it meant to face the strongest and most notorious Sasquatch in the Empire. This is what violence and pain and death looked like. This was Groose. Kill them, the elf muttered. Kill them! Kill the brute, kill the dwarf, kill Cain, kill them all! It took a few seconds for his raging order to register with his men. Those few seconds were all a certain sniper needed. Before the first goon raised his gun, an impact round dropped him like a swatted fly. The next muttered a half curse before he met the same fate. As more and more of them started dropping, Lucas and Thorgan took the opportunity to resume the gunfight, and thanks to the panic from watching Groose utterly destroy their strongest member, the mob was in complete disarray. Shotgun rounds and fire shots cut the men to ribbons, while Strife took cover behind a convenient pillar. Elias Strife, ninth son of Albus Strife, watched as months of planning and bargaining went up in smoke. His money was non-existent, his men were either dead, dying, or maimed, and his greatest investment, the cave troll, was being beaten within an inch of its life. This was the end of his ambitions, all because of a human. His thoughts were interrupted by the pieces of pillar that erupted in his face, a result from a fire round from the gun of the aforementioned human. The stony shrapnel temporarily blinded him. As he rolled around on the ground in pain, he barely makes out over his own painful groans the final death rattles of his cave troll as Groose punched his face into a green blob of gore. After a minute or so, the battle had ended. Most of his men were dead, and those that weren't probably wished they were. Groose gave the troll one last punch before roaring in triumph over his victory. "Oi, Groose, me lad," Thorgan said, walking over to his large friend. "I do love watching your work." The Sasquatch just smiled sheepishly at the compliment. "Sashama mingo cha-cha," he replied. Don't be so modest. After this, we'll hit the pub and get a pint. Sound good?" "Yeah." Strife, his vision cleared up by now, crawled over to one of his deceased minion's guns, hoping to lay a shot at his hated foes. All he got for his efforts was this shattered hand as Mr. Fisher made impact. He howled in pain as Lucas stood over him. He said. "No gun for you tonight." The elf clutched his hand, tears streaming down his face. "You liar," he growled. "You said you wouldn't stop me. This isn't part of your job, but you were just supposed to exchange the kid for the money." Lucas leaned down close to him. "Yeah, I kind of lied about that last particular part." "What?" "I wasn't lying when I said I was followed through on a job I was given. The thing I lied about was the job itself. You see, my job wasn't to exchange 50 million drachmas for my employer's kid. It was to get the kid back and make sure that you and everyone involved never tried something like this again." This was a hit! Strife never thought the possibility that the parents could have actually hired Cain to just kill him. Of course not, exclaimed Lucas. We're freelancers. We're not assassins. We'd get in trouble with the guild if we did. The parents just wanted their kid back. They may have hinted that they wouldn't be opposed if you and your group were not among the living anymore. So, what now? The elf asked. Well, the family doesn't know what we know. Your name, your face, your family, it's all us. So I'll cut you a deal. What kind of deal? You go back to your normal life, back to your mansion, your money, your family, and forget about doing this again. I go back to my bosses and say every last person involved in the kidnapping and their son is dead. Take the deal, or I have Groose come over and crush your head like a grape. Strife cast an eye to Groose, grinning menacingly and striking his fist into his open hand. After all the chaos that these people had wrought upon, he believed it. Any one of them could kill him right now, and there was nothing he could do about it. If I were you, lad, I'd take it, Thorgan added. I agree. The human grinned at the acceptance of his as he stood straight up. Good. You're a smart guy. Now we shall take the kid and our leave. You might call an ambulance for these guys. Well, the ones that are still alive. He said, turning on his heel. Okay, boys. Let's not keep our dear sniper waiting. Let the heartbeat wait! Exclaimed Thorgan. Thorgan! Groose said, causing the dwarf to laugh loudly. Groose, you have a dirty mind, and that's why I love ya. With case in hand, Lucas joined his partners and strolled out of the bullet-ridden, bombed-out lobby and into the night air. Now, normally, any reasonable person would just walk away and do nothing more. Then we have elven pride. Greater than regular old normal pride, elvish pride is more powerful and dangerous. Elvish pride can make overwhelming an elf's normally logical brain and make them do something incredibly stupid when they feel they've been wronged by something they would consider beneath them. This is what Elias Strife was feeling at the moment. His entire operation had been utterly wrecked by a human, a dwarf, and a Sasquatch. His mind told him to let them go, but his pride was screaming at him to teach him a lesson. His pride moved him to his feet, scrambled for a weapon, and picked up an assault rifle with his one good hand. No good maggots, he had angrily spat. I will be the master of crime. I will not be insulted like this. He struggled with the gun since he only really had one good hand, but he was adjusting well enough. Halfway across the lot, Thorgan nudged Lucas a bit. Hey, Luke, he said, drawing his attention to the very stupid dwarf who was about to make a very stupid decision. I know, he said casually. Party starter. The dwarf reached into his pocket and handed him a small remote. Lucas Kane! The injured elf screamed. Turn around! I want you to see the man who kills you! Lucas sighed to himself, muttering something about the stupidity of some people. Strife halfway cocked the gun with his good hand when Lucas raised his remote. Hey, Sunshine, he called out. Enjoy the fireworks. Click. That was all that was needed to seal Elias Strife's fate. The entire building shook as the copious amounts of explosives that Thorgan had laid about the supports detonated. I'm not sure what went through his mind before he was consumed by the flames. Maybe thinking back of having that meager allowance wasn't so bad. Or seeing his brothers and sister again one more time. I would know. All I know is that the young elf was swallowed up by the billowing balls of fire from beneath him, possibly regretting his foolish choice to test Lucas Kane and his crew. By the time the trio had left the lot, the hotel was nothing more than a fiery pile of rubble burning into the night. Damn, Lucas marveled. That blowed up real good. Oh, aye, some of my best work, said the proud Thorgan. Maybe you should have lightened up on the C6, but... Oh yeah, and me and Groose here will wear nice pink pre-dresses and have a tea party with our dollies. Groose laughed along with Thorgan's joke. It would certainly be an improvement over your current state. Reese Fold made her presence known as she strolled out of the nearby alley, covered in her camel cloak, whispering her right hand. Oh, the elf bitch has jokes, Thorgan teased. More than you have, half-man, she fired back, removing her hood to let her long purple hair flow in the breeze. Seshima Shama. Reese pointed a finger at the Sasquatch. Do not encourage him. Her threat seemed to work as Gru shrunk back a little. Guys, can we please not do this now? Lucas spoke to his team. We gotta get out of here before the cops get here. I really don't feel like answering why I blew up an old hotel. The others nodded with his reasoning. He set the black case back down and popped it open. Besides, he started as he pulled the happy and safe little pup out. We gotta get this little guy back home. Sasha, Sasha. The hairy giant cooed at the sight of the little one. Even the Ice Queen herself couldn't help but crack a smile at the chipper yapping of the pup. He is pretty cute. For a lichen. Ah, you can do better than that. He's mighty cute for anything, Thorgan said, scratching behind his ear. Let's move out, people. Jinx is probably going to go and stir crazy, waiting for us back on the Howard. Without another word, the dwarf, the elf, and the Sasquatch followed their leader as he, pup in hand, walked down the street, hopefully able to catch a bus to the airport without anyone asking too many questions as to why they were armed as they were. This was their team, and why I enjoy watching them. Bicker as they might, with their strange habits and quirks, theirs was a team built on respect, trust, and friendship. This unique bond is the main reason why they were able to succeed as well as they did, and why they were the best in the Empire. Kane! What's up, Bruce? Cha-cha machida, choo-choo katema-cha, he said, motioning with his hand over his head. Not you, too! Even he thinks so, too. You need a hat, lad. Possibly a bowler or a fedora. I don't need a freaking hat. Oh, a sombrero. You could pull it off, lad. How about a top hat? Cha-cha. That could work, too. That's it. I've had it. You're all fired. When we get back, turn in your keys and get out. But you did not give us keys, Lucas Kane. Then I'll have some keys made, give them to you, and then you can turn them in. Happy? And so ends Chapter 1 of New World. Chapter 1 ends. All right, boys and girls. That was a grinder right there. So, still in the chat. Yeah, glad you enjoyed it. I did the choking effects were a nice little touch on my part. Glad you enjoyed it. All right, with that out of the way, we're going to take a small break. As I'm going to get some water, hydrate my throat, hit the bathroom, and then we'll finish up by hitting Chapter 2, and then we'll finish up for the night. So, everyone else, we'll take about a 5-minute break. See you then. All right, we are back, ladies and gentlemen. Break is over. Got some water in me, drained the lizard, and took some honey from my throat. So we are back and ready for some more. So, what did you guys? Now that I'm looking at the chat, what did you guys think of the first chapter? If you're still there, I know Devil's still here, probably still at work, but enjoying the listening. All right, just gonna wait a couple of more minutes before getting started with chapter 2. Okay, just gotta make sure to check my mail right quick. All right, 3 listeners. That's more than enough. That's great. All right. All right. Everybody's here. So, it's about time we're going to get started with chapter 2. For those of you just joining me, I'm currently reading my book, New World. And I just finished chapter 1, which was a short introductory to our main cast of characters, how they roll, what their relation is to each other, and what's going forward. Now this chapter will begin the story proper and get more into the main plot of the series. All right, you guys ready? Water, hydrate it up. All right, now we begin chapter 2, The Uninvited Guest. Fold Airport, the largest airport within the continental empire, located just 5 miles away from the center of New York City. Each day, more than 400 flights arrive and depart from nearly 900 cities within the country, with cargo and passengers coming as far away south as El Paradiso and as far north as the Alaskan Islands. Now, if you're expecting to catch an international flight to another country, then you are, as they say in your air, shit out of luck. Since the Crow terrorist attacks of 405 NW, air travel to and from the Empire is heavily restricted, and in most cases, utterly forbidden. Now, what do you do if you want to go to another country? Well, if you wanted to head down south to the RUS, then you would either catch a truck train or on one of the superhighways that crisscrosses the Empire, or if you wanted to head towards the Protectorate, taking a very long boat ride. Regardless of these restrictions, more than 85% of the Empire's usable goods pass through this airfield. It is here where a couple stood on the eastern half of the airport, off the official terminal near one of what we'd call an abandoned hangar. The man of the duo was a middle-aged, probably around 70 years or so, rather well dressed in a black suit and a dapper umbrella to keep the drizzling rain off himself and his wife. The woman, hunched down next to him, was similarly dressed, almost as if they were going to a funeral. She was slightly taller and fitter than her husband, reasonable since she was a lichen and he was only a human. These were the Dumbs family, a rather well-off clan that had several connections both within the Gravlev industry and the IPD. When their only son was kidnapped by an unknown party, one of their connections referred them to someone who could possibly rescue their offspring. But Mrs. Dumbs didn't want her son back, just want her son back. She wanted them to pay for thinking they could get away with an easy payday off her son. That's where Lucas Kane comes in. The said problem solver strode out of the lone hangar, duster blowing in the winds, along with a rather large, hold on. All right, sorry about that. Someone just messaged me, had to reply. Okay. Said problem solver strode out of the hangar, duster blowing in the wind, along with a very large, hold on for a second. Said problem solver strolled out of the lone hangar, duster blowed in the wind, along with a very happy, lichen pup in his arms. The couple's eyes brightened with hope and happiness as Lucas released the pup to run on the ground, allowing him to run eagerly to the waiting arms of his mother. "Oh, my precious little boy, Mommy's here! Mommy's here!" exclaimed the Lady Lichen as she rained kisses on his furry face. The pup responded by licking her face. The man rubbed his son's ears, holding back the tears of joy in his eyes. Neither seemed to notice Lucas's arrival, but he didn't seem to mind. Thank you so much, she cried. Is he... He started giving his son the once-over. Lucas waved his hand. He's fine, she answered. The rescue was a bit loud, but he came out of it okay. Tough little guy. The pup barked happily at his savior, getting bigger smiles from his parents. Thank you, Mr. Lucas Kane. The Lady Dumbs leaned over and gave him a quick peck on the cheek in gratitude. Son in hand, she left the two men alone and entered the passenger side of their jet black 45 Criosus Grand Class. You brought my son home. That's what you hired me for. And the other thing? He asked, no further words needed. Rest assured, your kidnappers will never do this again, or walk among the living. A smile mixed with relief and a bit of darkness materialized in his face upon hearing the news. Good. That's good. Hold on for a second. Alright, gotta take a small break. Oh, hello, Crazy C Productions. Gotta take a small break. Run into some issues with a friend of mine. Gotta try to unrestrict the video so she can watch. Okay. All right, just give me a second. Okay. Sorry, a friend of mine is trying to watch it, and for some reason is saying it's restricted on her end, so I'm just gonna try to unrestrict it for her. All right. All right, let me try this. Okay. Okay. Da, 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 da. All right, visibility. All right, we're gonna try this again for her. All right. All right. Hopefully that'll clear things up for her. I like to try to make it so that everyone can watch my stuff. All right. All right. While that's going on, we'll keep going, just so she can hear us. Close. I'll keep that up just in case. All right. Let's see. Okay. That's good. Very good. Mr. Dumbs walked to the trunk of his very expensive car and opened it, retrieving a large black case not too dissimilar from the one Lucas used on his job. When I asked a few friends of mine in the New York IPD to refer me to a good freelancer, they said all the same thing. Get Lucas Kane, he started. For one man to be so well recommended, I was a bit skeptical. But you saved my son and made the crooks pay. You exceeded my expectations, and thus you earned your payment. The black case was presented to Lucas, who readily accepted it. His face grew a quizzical expression as he felt the weight of the object. Feels a bit heavy. It should. It's double what we agreed. The quizzical expression was suddenly replaced with one of genuine surprise at the revelation. Double? But my rate for this is, I know what your rate is. I felt you deserved more. Lucas was not one to look a gift horse in the mouth, so he protested no more. So this is it? Indeed it is. Lucas extended his hand to his current employer, which he took. With this exchange of payment, the contract between myself, Lucas Kane, and yourself, Sir Dumbs, for the safe return of your son and the elimination of the parties responsible for the abduction has been completed fairly, and thus our transaction has ended. I concur, he added, before releasing his hand. Good night, Mr. Lucas Kane. Good night to you, Mr. Dumbs. Take care of that boy of yours. The father nodded towards him before walking back to his car, getting in, and driving off into the rainy night. Lucas gave him a last wave as the car containing the reunited family exited the airfield. The lone freelancer, as always, ignored the rain, warmed by the weight of his well-deserved double payment. He was sure his fellows in the hangar would be more than pleased. Turning on his heel, he advanced back towards the hangar. Upon re-entering the building, he was greeted by the sight of his team's only mode of air travel, the Geese Howard. The Howard was a twin-engine cargo plane graciously given to him by the chief of the New York IPD as a going-away present upon his resignation from the force. The plane was confiscated during the drug ring that was smuggling flux from the Southern Union to the greater empire. It was up for public auction, but didn't go for much since no one wanted to buy a drug plane and the fact that it needed a ton of work. It was a junker, plain and simple. It barely started. One engine was shot to pieces when they busted in that ring. The paint job was horrid, and the flaps tended to stick when making hard angle turns. But Lucas saw the value of this poor metal creature and spent the last 10 years fixing it up. Now it could fly more reliably thanks to Thorgan's many overhauls of the frame and engines. The paint job, a red and white striped pattern over the wings, was decided by the quartermaster of the crew. It wasn't the fastest or the prettiest, but of the most maneuverable plane in the sky, but it got you from point A and point B when you needed to. Lucas advanced to the open hatch in the back of the Howard's body. Entering the plane, he was greeted by the waiting looks of his crew. Reese was cleaning Whisper with a small white piece of cloth. Thorgan and Groove seemed to be having a conversation between the two of them, which wrapped up when he entered and sitting at a small table in the middle of the cargo hold was the last member of their crew, Jinx. Little Jinx was the youngest member of the crew, but did the most when it compared to the others. She paid the bills that needed to be paid, tidied up around the office, flew the Howard, drew up contracts for jobs they took, did the research involving the jobs, and sorted out all the money when the job was done. She pretty much did it all since no one else in the crew wanted to do them, or just plain couldn't do them. Her style of dress was very unique to her, a simple green vest over a yellow-pink shirt, plaid kilt, and army boots. On her wrist was a Newton 4 portable computer which gave her access to the net at a moment's notice. Behind her were a pair of large insect-like wings that poked out from holes in the vest, signifying her status as a fae. Faes were of the same class of beings known as forest folk, creatures of nature. This included sprites, leprechauns, gnomes, pixies, nymphs, and sylphs. Took you long enough, Lucas, she chastised, her eyes turning an annoyed orange. She wasn't really afraid to get on Lucas's ass if he held up business, since she was pretty much in charge of the money and how it would be used for the good of the crew. Sorry. The clients were very grateful to having their son back. He placed the case on the table, all eyes on it like a hungry pack of lichens. 5 million 5 ways. Not a bad haul. A sly grin rolled on Lucas's face. That would be true if they didn't pay double. A round of various gasps and happy grunts filled the cargo hold of the Howard. For real, Luke? Her eyes now a happy pink. See for yourself. The human turned the case around and popped the locks opening, revealing a massive stack of light red bills, all embossed with the image of the first king of vampires. Thorgan smiled a cheap grin. Cruz gave a deep, almost perverted chuckle. Reese cracked a small, reserved smile. Jinx was already on her wrist computer, typing up a few commands in the keypad, calling up a blue holographic screen. After a few minutes of number crunching, she recalled the screen with a smile. With this, we should be able to get everything paid off for the next few months with a little extra left over. Take it all in, folks. You all learned this, Lucas said to his cohorts as each took a small stack of bills, thumbing through them with a feeling of satisfaction. Oh, I'm going to have a great time with this stuff, lads, said Thorgan. Got a few barrels of rusty and golden ale I can get a lot sooner than later. Reese's face curled up in disgust. How you can drink that toxic sludge I will never know. It's a mighty sight better than that sugary swill you drink. No bite, he yelled. I'll have you know that Sylvan wine takes more time and effort to craft than that whatever it is you drink. And with this money, I can afford a nice bottle of 713. A good year, she retorted. With this, I can finally afford those new propellers for the Howard. You know he really needs it, studied Jinx. As well as getting that much-needed upgrade to the office computer. Crusoe, lad! What will you be spending your pay on? Asked Thorgan. Solchi tejamut, muchinemashicha, he answered. Everyone's faces paled in response to his answer. Thorgan looked like he was going to throw up. Reese wasn't able to form a word. Lucas just shook his head, and Jinx just put her hand to her mouth. Cruz, that's horrible, she said. Pachi chime. I don't care. You can't spend your money on that. You're going to catch something if you keep that up. Regaining his senses, Lucas reached inside the case and removed a few bundle of bills. Enough of Bruce's personal business, regardless of how bad it is, he started eyeing the Sasquatch. Jinx, divide the money up the usual way, put my share in my account for later. Can do, she answered, giving a half salute. I'll just take this as walking around money, he mentioned, pocketing the cash in his coat. Gotcha. I'll lock up the Howard after that. You guys can take off. The face suggestion was met with agreed nods. Lucas turned around and began down the ramp that led outside the plane. You're not going to blow it all on old world crap again, are you? She called after him. He merely turned around and waved without saying another word. Jinx sighed. He is, or I, most certainly. It was still raining lightly when Lucas exited the hangar and made his way to the small parking lot that was reserved for his crew. There were only 4 vehicles that occupied the spaces in the lot. A small yellow scooter that belonged to Jinx that had the words, Let's Baby on the front. A large black Iron Jack 4-wheel drive van that belonged to Thorgan. Reese's sky blue Street Ninja motorcycle. And of course, Lucas's car. You see, Lucas was an old world collector, a person who collects anything from the old world, music, movies, art, games, etc. He loved old world stuff since he was a boy and spent the better part of his pay in getting whatever he could to get his hands on. So, of course, this hobby reflected in the vehicle of choice. An AD 1981 DeLorean DMC-12, completely refurbished with an Axiom steel chassis, a Model 13 Ether drive engine, rock-wall tires, and a nice silver paint job. Sure, it wasn't uncommon to see old-world cars on the roads these days, since several auto companies can and will recreate old-world classic cars for collectors like Lucas, but no one offered a DeLorean since the car itself was virtually extinct. He found it completely by accident in a job in Old Houston. There was a junkyard that happened to pass by on his way to the airport. He immediately recognized it from one of his favorite old world movies, Back to the Future, and bought it for cheap from the guy in charge. It took him 2 years, several paychecks, and a few favors, but he was able to get it up and running. As the only DeLorean in the city, if not the whole country, everyone knew who it belonged to and knew well enough not to try to mess with it, unless they wanted a pissed-off freelancer on their case. He removed the small keychain from his pocket and spoke a small incantation in the rune on it. A small blue glow raced along the edges of the door, signaling the release of the Magitech security system on the car. The driver's side gull-wing door hissed open, welcoming its owner as he approached. He sat down and closed the door before inserting his key. The ether drive engine hummed to life, a small burst of bluish flame erupting from the exhaust. Shifting into gear, he took off like a bolt from the lot and onto the street. Just before pulling out into the superhighway, he popped in his C-stick that contained his entire collection of music, calling one of his favorite songs, Michael Jackson's Off the Wall. As the song played, he drove on the on-ramp to the superhighway that would take him back to New York City. The trip wasn't long. The traffic was somewhat light. Lucas's eyes stuck to the road as various cars and trucks of varying makes and models moved alongside of him and past him. The huge glare of headlights filled his rearview mirror, accompanied by a low rumble of an engine. He glanced in his rearview mirror and switched lanes. From his left side appeared the intimidating form of a truck train. Truck trains look exactly how they sound. Massive big rigs with tires almost as big as Lucas's DeLorean, gigantic exhaust pipes on the side that belched out blue flames, and the loud rumble of the 48 drive engines revving in his ears. Trailing behind the rig was the passenger cars, 4 long and 3 levels high. He caught sight of the various passengers, some sleeping and others awake, doing activities to keep themselves from getting bored. Truck trains were the easiest way to get around from city to city in the Empire. Air travel was still a thing, just not to the level it once was, since truck trains were safer and cheaper overall. Along the side of the car was the departure and arrival locations, St. Aura to New Hampshire, so it made sense for it to pass by New York City. Speaking of that, Lucas turned up the highway and turned to his destination, New York City, specifically Hell's Kitchen. No, don't let the name fool you. It's actually a quite nice neighborhood. The name is merely a holdover from the days of the old world, from humans who wanted to keep the memory of the old city alive. Its official name is Maganon, but everyone still calls it Hell's Kitchen. This was Lucas's chosen neighborhood, a spot he picked out for himself in his days as a detective. As he drove off ramp and onto the streets, his eyes caught sight of the many goings-on in this late hour. On the corner, he saw Lucky Luigi, the leprechaun pimp of the East Side, showing an unlucky satyr what it meant to mistreat one of his girls. Luigi never peddled his wares during the day out of respect for the many families that lived there, but at night he was all business. Just down the street, he saw the Silver Family Construction Company burning the midnight oil in building the newest Rick's Chicken Shack. Lucas subconsciously licked his lips. He loved Rick's Chicken. 3 streets down further, he was met by the sight of a pickup game in the large basketball court that resided just inside Silver Park. Another night, he would have joined in on such a game, but he had to get back, and he didn't have an interest nor the energy for it. Besides, the Bronx Brothers were playing. The Bronx Brothers played rough. After a few more minutes of driving, he finally reached the first of his 2 destinations before reaching his apartment. It was Jack's Flashback, a small thrift store located a few blocks from his home. It was a store that specialized in old world merchandise. Old world shops like this were rare to find. As a matter of fact, this was the only one in New York City. It was tucked just between a dwarf-owned drugstore and a convenience store owned by a rather surly-looking gnome who smoked cigars all day. Lucas parked his car just across the street, which was near the apartment building of Old Man Rupert. "The hell do you want, youngster?" sneered the old lichen. He could be found on the steps of this building he owned, snapping at passers-by, waving his cane at anyone who felt disrespected vets. Rupert served in the Imperial Army as a second lieutenant during the 2-year war with the POV 40 years ago. He loved to tell the tale about how he lost his leg to the beast during that Battle of Hawaii, but hardly anyone believed him, even when he showed him his cybernetic replacement. "Just making a pit stop, boss," Lucas replied. He spat. "Don't spend your money on that junk. You should be giving your money to the vets. We fought for our nation and our emperor." "I'll make sure to drop a few extra dracks next Empire Day, okay?" he answered back with a smirk. Before Rupert could begin another vet's tirade, a group of children dashed past him and onto the roof, thus sparing Lucas his wrath. He walked into the store. The familiar scent of old world and electricity filled his nostrils. The store was brightly lit with posters of old bands and movies along the walls. Various models of TVs sat against them, and a glass case full of old electronic handheld devices served as both counter and showcase for buyers. The sound of what he recognized as Born on the Bayou piped in on the speakers all around the store. There seemed to be no one at the till, even though it was a solid hour before it was set to close. Lucas slapped his palm on the silver bell at the display case, ringing it twice. After about half a minute, a small slide of rustling of books and boxes could be heard coming from the back room. Out of the door of said room emerged the owner of Jack's Flashback. Jack was a Mothman. Simple as that. Standing about 5'2", Jack had all the features of one of his species. Large red eyes, thick black fur, if you could call it fur, a small beaked mouth, and long limbs. Long for someone so short. He wore no shoes on his two-toed feet, and his knees were bent backwards. In fact, the only clothing he wore was a red baseball cap and an aqua boot t-shirt that said "I love NY" on it. He lightly flew over the floor with his wings out of his back to greet his friend. "Jack! And here I was thinking you were closed up early," he said, taking his three-fingered hand into his own in a friendly handshake. Jack's voice was high-pitched with sparse clicking sounds sprinkled in between the syllables. "Nah, just doing some light inventory. Trading with a guy on this town." "Always willing and dealing, my friend." "Haven't seen you around, Luke. Got a new job?" "Had one. Just back from the West Coast, and I had for some fresh tracks that need a new home." The Mothman's eyes widened. If a Mothman had lips or cheeks, he would most certainly be grinning from ear to ear. And I immediately thought of you, Jack. Immediately." "Ooh, that's why you're my favorite customer," he clicked excitedly. "So what you got for me?" Jack flew over the counter and began rummaging through the various boxes and containers he kept away from view. Lucas leaned on the glass case, seeing what the owner exactly had for him to buy. He produced a small black Bosch and laid it on the counter before retrieving a small container holding a card inside. "How about this? A vintage AD 1996 Michael Jordan trading card, signed by the man himself." The freelancer pondered it for a moment, staring at the object in question. He shook his head slightly. "I don't know. Not a big card fan myself. Not to mention, every time I look at him, I keep reminded of that thing that happened with him when he was in his 70s. And Jack cut him off before he finished. "Good point." He reached back into the box and produced yet another rare item. "How about a bottle of Hugo Boss cologne? Make you smell real good for the ladies." "No way. Last time I messed with old world cologne, I got a rash on my neck for weeks. Hard pass." The Mothman replaced the bottle back in the box. Rubbing his chin, Jack thought for a few seconds before floating to the bookshelf behind him. He picked out a stack of 7 books and returned to the counter. "This should get you going. The entire Harry Potter series." Lucas perked up at the news. "All 7? First edition?" "Please, I wouldn't be bringing you these if they weren't." Lucas whistled as he perused the hardcover with the books. They were in grand condition for being over 1,000 years old, with only a few nicks and bends along the edges. "You got yourself a tasty find, man. Always wanted to read the books." "So you want them?" "I don't know. Got anything else I might like?" Jack thought for a minute. "I was gonna save this, but when it's all fixed up proper, but since you asked..." The Mothman placed the box back on the counter and flew to the door to the back room, beckoning his friend to follow. Lucas did so, his interest already piqued. Entering the back room, he marveled at the sight of all the various crates, boxes, and containers that occupied the area. Curiosity filled him. All these must be from his recent shipment from Liztown. He was tempted to ask what was in the crates, but Jack urged him to push on. Towards the back, he found Jack standing next to a large tarp covering something very tall and very square. "So what's this find you wanted to show me?" He snickered, reaching down to insert a black plug into the outlet of the wall. The object lit up, and sounds of music emanated from under the tarp. With a very dramatic pull, he unveiled the prize to Lucas. The human's eyes went wide with surprise and awe. A sudden intake of air, followed by a giddy grin as he approached the machine. "Is this..." "Yes, sir. You're looking at a fully functional Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles arcade machine circa AD 1989. Fully functional 4-player controls, horizontal display, and optional attract mode. Really lucked out on this one. Had to trade some of my best swag to get it, but it was worth it," Jack explained. Lucas manipulated the joystick and the controls, a sense of wonder on his face. "The sticks seem okay. Buttons are sticking a little." "I just got it in today. I haven't had a chance to really look it over and get it a basic fix-up." Can you mod it for free play?" Who you talking to, Luke?" It was enough for him. Groovy. "So how much?" "Normally, something like this rare, I charge 1,000 dracs, but since we're friends and all, 700. 700? Lucas asked incredulously. You're gonna bleed me dry. How about 300? 300? Luke, I gotta make a profit here. 650. No. How about 450? Luke, you're breaking my balls. You don't have any balls. Well, if I had them, you'd be breaking them, Jack joked. How about this? 500, and I throw in the books for free. Lucas looked at him in amazement. Really? The whole set? The whole set? The sound of that deal was enough to make him reach into his pocket to fiddle with the stack of cash underneath it. Jinx is gonna kick my ass for this, but you got a deal. Jack laughed in joy at the completed deal. I knew you'd take it. Let's head back up and I'll ring you up. Taking in his hands of his newly purchased game, Lucas was led back to the front of the store by the insect-like owner. After exchanging bills, Jack placed the books in a large plastic bag and handed them over to his new owner. I have the game sent over to you after I mod it. Thanks, Jack. You're a great human being. No problem, Luke, he answered, cleaning his arms with his long tongue. Hey, Luke, can you do me a favor? You know, about that thing we talked about? Lucas shook his head, knowing exactly what he was talking about. I don't know about that, my friend. Jinx is picky when it comes to men. Come on, just a kind word or something. Lucas paused for a bit, pondering the request. Looking at the pleading compound eyes of his friend, his resolve failed him. With a sigh, he said, fine, I'll put in a good word for you. But that's it. Can't promise you anything else from here. You're the man, Luke, he exclaimed. I'll give you a discount next time you're around. I'll hold you to that, Jack. See you later. Later, Luke. Lucas exited the shop and returned to his car. His next stop before heading home wasn't very far from the shop. It was another place where most of his money goes. Bubba's Deli. He parked his car across the street from the eatery and entered, the smell of cured meats entering his nose like an old friend. He inhaled deeply as he took stock of the deli. Countless tables and booths in red color filled to the dining area. The display showed the various meats, cheeses, and breads that New York had to offer. Behind the counter hung more meats and breads to be cut and portioned to the customer's liking. Normally this place would be crowded with patrons from all walks of life, but since it was very late in the evening, it was practically empty, save for a single man near the back. The only other person he saw was a boy behind the counter. He looked no older than 10, with a white t-shirt and blue shorts. He spun around in his stool, trying to alleviate his boredom, until he caught sight of Luke. Hey, Luke, he greeted. Hey, Mark. Slow night? Nah, just starting to close up. And where's your dad? Lucas's answer came in the form of a loud shout from the back room. Where are you looking, ref? He's got a goddamn chair! Watching the match. Figures. Can you get him? You know how he is when the match is on, Luke, the kid warned. I'll run the risk. Just go get him. Your funeral. The young man slid off his stool and trekked to the back room. The TV volume lowered a bit and the child began to talk to his father. What followed was a stream of curses, both in the common tongue and Lucin, the language of the leprechauns. It's amazing how a person can swear in so many tongues. Even after all these years, New York is still a melting pot, more so now than ever. After what seemed like an eternity, the owner of the deli emerged from the back room. Bubba was a large man, about 6 feet tall, receding hairline, large frame, stocky limbs. He wasn't overweight in the traditional sense. He was more like a healthy sort of fat. Not that anyone would dare call him fat to his face unless they wanted to be taken behind the deli and show just how fat his fists were. A form-fitting white t-shirt jutted out from the sides of his gray apron that covered the front with a few meats and juice stains on it. A pair of trousers and black hard-tipped boots completed the wardrobe. Well, look who the cat dragged in, he said in his distinct New York accent. Don't you mean, look who the rat dragged in, he said in his distinct New York accent. Don't you mean cat? I know what I said, you bastard. His tone betrayed his mood, as he was happy to see his friend and longest-serving customer. He took a swig from a large mug of steaming red liquid before setting it down on the counter. Oneg? Asked Lucas. He nodded. Yeah, the wife thinks I should cut down on the rich stuff, you know? Doesn't get the same flavor, but it's like drinking cardboard, you know? O-neg, as in O negative, as in O negative blood. Bubba here is a vampire. Actually, fifth generation vampire on his father's side. Like any vampire, he needs blood to live, and thanks to the Empire's vast network of blood farms, he will never go without. You want a hit? Bubba offered. He smiled, looking at Lucas's face frown up at the thought. After cleaning his mind of the thought, he placed his eyes on his only patron in the place. Sounds like you were in a bad mood back there. WrestleFest 56 is on tonight. Oh, that's right, it was on. How is it? Match has been pretty far. That cage death match was brutal. I'll catch up the replay this week. Lucas turned his eyes to the lone patron eating quietly in his seat before turning his back to them. Don't usually see you entertaining customers this late. Bubba answered. Oh, he's a regular. Comes in here around this time every week. Orders the same thing. Pays well enough. Never starts trouble. Kinda stays to himself, but not a loner. More of a people person, you know? Oh, I'm sorry, I completely forgot about this part. So silly me to forget something as important as this. Well, when you're as old as I am, you tend to forget things. Now, you're probably wondering why I'm placing so much emphasis and so much importance on this singular person. The answer is simple. That person is me. Yes, sitting there, right there, enjoying a nice meal is me, myself, and I. It's rather complicated to explain since you're wondering how I can be here and there at the same time. The short answer would be he is me, but a me from a different time period. I know that's not much of an explanation, but the best way I can describe it without a long drawn-out account of my origins and temporal mechanics and other nuances I'm sure you're not interested in. But the fact remains is thus. He is me and I am him. How do I look, you're probably wondering? Well, you're well deserved of that. I'm of average height, not too tall, not too short. My skin is tanned, almost golden brown. My hair is decently long and straight, reaching to my upper back. What strikes people the most is what they see is the color, or colors in this case. Half bone white, half pitch black. I can't remember how my hair turned those tones, nor do I remember what its original hue was. Well, you try remembering all the little details of the first millennia. My eyes are green. No, not that green you're thinking of. It's more of a haunting green. People tell me it's hard to look me in the eye. The color is... what's the word I'm looking for? Unsettling? But yes, that's the word. Unsettling green. My attire consists of a dress suit matching the colors of my hair with the black and white on places, giving a nice symmetrical look to me. It's topped off with my umbrella. I take it with me everywhere. It's how I get from place to place with the utmost speed and precision. Again, that's hard to explain. Now I've been across the universe many times. I have seen sights that the human mind cannot and should not comprehend. I have seen stars that burn cold and ice that burns your skin. I have seen planets born and die in a single moment. I have seen cultures and species beyond counting. The ducks of Tyria, the great Dufin expanse, the talking horses of Helion Prime, the vast Syrian Empire. I have been and seen these places, and for some reason, this deli makes the best Reuben sandwich I have ever eaten. And that's why I'm here. I come here every week to order the same thing I always do. A Reuben sandwich made with Salem ham, Roustian stink cheese, light stink of course, mustard, and topped with two fresh slices of Elven rye. Add to that with a handful of straight-cut man fries and a tall glass of lep tea, and you have the makings of the perfect meal. I must remind myself to make an order soon. Oh, I'm sorry, we're drifting. Let's get back to the story at hand. So you wouldn't want to be here to shoot the shit unless you came from a job and you want to splurge. Lucas tapped his nose. You know me too well. What you got for me? Bubba grinned as he led him around the showcase of the various cuts of meat and cheeses he got from all over the city from people who owe him favors. Okay, I got some Nessie, fresh from the lake. Nah, Nessie gives me gas. Ditto, okay, let's see here. We got some prime cut. Still gnawing on the chunk you gave me a while back. At least you're still eating it. Thunderbird? In this season? Okay, good point. You got anything new? Wait a sec, I think I got just the thing. Bubba walked over to the large cooler and popped it open. He fished around the contents, digging into the bottom, and he soon returned with a generous cut of meat, dark brown in color. Whoa, that looks tasty. The deli owner opened the meat, or looked at the meat with the pride of a father. What you're looking at here, my friend, is the prime cut of genuine roast beef. Lucas's eyes went wide before saying in a rather hushed tone, "Roast beef? In the Empire? How did you—" He stopped his question short before realizing the answer to his unspoken query. "Where'd you get this?" "I know a guy who knows a dude who was a cousin in the Protectorate Customs. Favors were exchanged, money changed hands, things happen, you know?" "You know," he started, "if I was still a cop, I could bust you for importing and selling illegal contraband from a foreign nation without a proper permit." "I give you half." Lucas raised his finger. "Like I said, if I was still a cop." The two men then shared matching shit-eating grins before Bubba spoke again. How much you want?" "Give me 6 pounds and a nice slab of stink cheese. Medium stink." It didn't take long for the deli master to carve an appropriate amount of meat from the mass and wrap it up in butcher's paper. Then skillfully sliced a large wedge of the foul-smelling cheese and gifting it the same covering as the meat. I wouldn't dare say how much he paid for it, but the rest assured he got a good deal for it. "Days goes. Now can you get out of here before I miss the main event?" Bubba's demand was punctuated by the loud smash of a body on the ring and the roar of the crowd in frenzied appreciation. The vampire then shot him a glare and bared his fang lightly. "Say no more." Lucas slung a bag of food over his shoulder and made for the exit. Bubba called out to him one last time before heading to the back to the match. "Don't eat all the way home, yeah?" Lucas replied, "No promises." In no time, he was cruising down the street, his radio now playing Beat It. It was another 10 minutes before he arrived at his final destination, 564 Biden Avenue. Lucas parked the DeLorean in the small parking lot across the street from the apartment complex he lived in. The rent was nice and affordable, the nice neighborhood was decent and very little crime, and everyone knew him. In fact, they knew him well enough to keep a lookout over his apartment when he wasn't there. He strode up to the brownstone steps, looking up just in time to catch a few roof runners leaping from the top of the building to the top of another building next door. He didn't mind them so long as they didn't mess with his place during their races when they stretched across the city. Upon entering, he heard the sounds of a piano played by Mr. Dasher, the landlord. The aging vampire, about in his 120s, always played for his wife, a human in her young 70s around this time. The Dashers were a lovely couple who always were said a kind word to Lucas when they saw them. Further down the hall was the home of Sally, a succubus who made it a habit to try to get Lucas to share a bed with her. But he always politely declined. It wasn't that she was unattractive, he just wasn't one for casual sex. She must not have been at home, since he normally could sense when he was approaching and eagerly awaited for him like a cat waiting for a mouse to come out of its hole. He took an elevator up to the 12th floor and exited to the sound of the Rockwall family of dwarves having their nice nightly game of roughshod. Thankfully, his apartment was far enough away that the noise wouldn't have bothered him. Digging into his coat, he retrieved his keys on the same ring of his car keys and pushed the lock open. He pressed his thumb to the small scanner that was installed when he moved in 8 years ago, confirming his identity to the security system that guarded his home, allowing him entry. Lucas inhaled the deep smell of his home, which he hadn't seen in over a week. Even in the dim lighting, one could make out the details of his domicile. A modest studio apartment with dark wood floorboards on the entryway. Towards the center of the living room was a single gray-tanned couch, which saw a lot of use over the years. In front of it stood a small wooden and slightly nicked coffee table he got from the flea market in Markwood, just outside the Capitol. A massive 78-inch screen TV lorded over the area like a monolith of entertainment. Next to the TV was the door that led to one of the bedrooms, in this particular one being his own. Behind the living room was the smallish kitchen, complete with a set of dishes given to him by his brother on the day he moved in. The broad fridge hummed quietly, providing the only source of sound in the home. It was a colored blue with the words "Police Box" written on the top. But what really made the place his own was what was in it. The walls were covered with old posters. The walls were covered in old posters from movies most people wouldn't know about. There were 3 full arcade machines scattered about, soon to be joined by another. A grand jukebox sat in a corner, non-functional, but he didn't care. Next to it was a shelf full of books, some in poor condition, others pristine for being over 1,000 years old. The TV was surrounded by various movies and video games he had found and restored over the years. Beneath it was a rather old gaming system called Nintendo. It took nearly all of his pay from a past job to find someone who could modify it to work on modern holo-vid TV screens. This was his home, and he couldn't be happier. He slid off his coat and hung it up on the coat hooks next to the door, which closed behind him. Following this, he unbuckled his holster and placed it within his guns on the adjacent hook. He walked forward a bit until he stopped in one of the floorboards. It felt a bit tight to him, almost causing him to trip over his boots. He made a note to himself. Gotta get that fixed. Lucas entered the dark apartment before speaking. Lights. The overhead lights crackled before dimly illuminating the apartment. Lucas cursed himself again. Gotta get that fixed too. He sauntered into the living room and opened the refrigerator. Inside was a 6-pack of root beer, 2 containers of moo yogurt, half a gallon of milk, 3.5 pieces of pizza, and the remains of the last of his original beef. He was very tempted to crack open the newly gotten foodstuffs, but shot that thought down and simply deposited the items in the lower drawer. Closing the door, he reached up and grabbed a half-empty box of Grandpa Grumpy's crunchy stuffed cereal. Foregoing the bowl and the milk, he opted to just consume it straight from the box. He made his way to the couch, where he commanded, "TV on." The screen blinked to life, and the words, "Good evening, Lucas," in large letters appeared. He plopped down on the couch, and box in hand, and again under the command, "Change to news." The set immediately complied, and returned to the nearest news network. He shoveled a handful of cereal into his mouth just as the news theme of the station began to ring. As usual, after the usual graphics and the word scroll, the newscasters appeared, sitting at a desk they both shared. One a male, vampire, and the other female, an elf. The male spoke first. "Welcome, New York City, to INN, Imperial News Network. I'm Zachary Krillrame, and I'm Venus Realm. And here are the top stories. History was made today as His Highness Emperor Vladimir V signed a 5-year trade agreement with the Protectorate's Pope Franklin II at Castle Dracula earlier today. This marks the first time a cooperative pact had ever been struck between the Empire and the POV. Tensions have been an all-time high during the negotiation talks between the representatives of both nations. After a full year of talks, the terms of the agreement were finally finalized this week, with both leaders waiting to sign the agreement personally. The image shifts to one of a large ornate meeting hall, presumably inside of Castle Dracula. In the middle of the frame was a small, inexpensive-looking gold table. On one side sat the Emperor, clad in his red and black attire. On the other sat the current Pope, dressed in his regal white and gold vestments. Between the 2 of them on the table lay the agreement itself, unreadable from the distance that the camera was stationed. The 2 leaders were talking with each other, stern and serious expressions wrapped in their faces, but no one could make out what they were saying. The only audible sounds were the flashes of holocams and the questions of the reporters. Both leaders gave short interviews, and INN reporters shortly after the signings. Again, the image shifted to a close-up of Pope Franklin, with a hover mic in his face. With a nod, he began to speak. "I believe this agreement will benefit both the Empire and the Protectorate. The war from 40 years ago was a massive mistake from the previous Pope that cost lives on both sides. I have always wanted to clean up the mistakes of the past, as well as try to build a bridge to friendship of our long-lasting neighbor." The stream then cut to the Emperor, similar in his counterpart in posture and position. "I merely did as I did for the greater benefit of the Empire. This trade agreement will bring greater prosperity to our great nation. Nothing more needs to be said." The screen cut back to the 2 reporters, with the vampire speaking again. "According to major economists, this deal could bring in as much as 200 million drachma in new revenue, bolstering the economy to rival the Age of Wealth, headed up by the Emperor's grandfather, Vladimir III. Many believe that such a deal would never have been reached due to the events of the 2-year war, or Francis's folly, as it was come to be known in pop culture. The war cost the lives of over 100,000 soldiers on both sides of the conflict. It was only due to the Treaty of Malabia that the war came to a peaceful end." The female spoke next. "In In other news, fire brigades were called out to Old Los Angeles to the reports of a massive explosion. The source of the blast was at an old hotel in the slums. The blast was felt as far as downtown New Los Angeles and burned so hot that it took crews more than 3 hours to get to the blaze under control. Inside the building were the remains of 30 men, human and satyrs alike, as well as a few corpses that were burnt beyond recognition, making identifying them almost impossible. IPD detectives theorized that the building was in fact a hideout for a gang, possibly involved in the massive gang war that erupted over the territory of the late criminal kingpin, the Iron Midget Drigger Orgruff. Police are still investigating. I don't think I need to tell you that our dear freelancer had a knowing smile on his face as he crunched down on his snack. And now let us head over to the sports with our sportsman, Chet Wildman. Chet, how's it looking on the sports front? The camera panned over to a rather excited-looking lichen in a sport coat standing in front of a large view screen. Oh, tonight, it was a good night tonight, V. Tonight, WrestleFest 56 took place in New York's M4 Arena to a sold-out crowd of 89,000. 10 epic matches made up the card, but the matches of the night had to be the big title grudge matches for the big belts. First, we had the epic IWF tag team title match between Big Business, Vulcan Fullbuster, and Unstoppable Mike Eagle. Pain Incorporated dethroned the reigning champions Elijah and Zachariah, the New Vatican Boys, ending their unprecedented 2-year reign as champions. Let's go now to the M4 Arena with Alex Burgers as he interviews the new champs. The scene showed up on the big screen showed the reporter Axel standing between a sweaty dwarf in a leotard and a stocky, bare-chested human. Both were laughing and drinking as they wore large gold belts that they had won. Chet, I'm in the locker room with Pain Inc. And as you can see, the mood here is electric. Vulcan, how does it feel to be the new champs? How does it feel, Axel? I'll tell you, it feels bloody great. For years, those Bible-thumping ponces have been walking around talking about their God. Well, there's your God to save you when you're giving it the other business, huh? He was in the front row, eating popcorn and watching his boys lose. Woo! Called his partner. This is amazing. They've been ducking us for months, and with good reason, too. We beat that ass and took that belt. Now we run this division. And he's right. Pain Inc. is in business. The business of kicking your ass. And business is booming, baby. Well, as you can see, Pain Inc. are having the blast as the new tag champs. Back to you. The scene returns back to the studio. Definitely feeling the love here, Axel. But what about the old champs? Let's go live to Margaret Venter from the New Vatican Boys. The setting for this interview was, of course, the polar opposite of the previous one. A lovely red-haired woman stood between two pale white humans dressed in white tights and boots with crosses on their boots. Neither of them looked very happy. Elijah, Zachariah, you just heard from Pain Inc. What are your thoughts that you've lost the IWF tag team titles? Zachariah was the first to speak. How do we feel? Livid. To think those two heretics would steal from us the belts that the Lord himself blessed us with. This sin will not stand. God rewards the faithful, and through our faith we shall regain our titles and once again stand above the godless heathens of the IWF. For God wills it. God wills it. The New Vatican Boys, down but not out. Back to you, Chet. Thanks a lot, Margaret. The tag team division is definitely heating up, but it's not the only thing that was hot in the IWF tonight. Tonight, the IWF World Heavyweight title was on the line as the New Texas Terror. As the New Texas Terror, Big Bob Backlund took on the champion, the one-man dynasty Dexter Steen, in Buckland's signature match, a South Houston death match. It was a match for the ages that took brutality to all new levels, but in the end, the challenger just came up short of dethroning the longest reigning champion in IWF history. With more on the story, we go live to Benji Barnes with the challenger. This interview found the reporter a bespectacled human next to a much larger and visibly angrier human sporting dried blood on his hairy chest, a dapper-looking cowboy hat, and a very large cigar.
Chet, I'm here with Big Bob Backlund. So, Bob, you lost your chance at the world title tonight in your signature match. How do you feel after this match? How am I feeling? He replied, his voice thick with his new Texas accent. Like Dookie. That's how that whole bastard got lucky and snuck a win. That white-wearing poofer. Now that you failed to get the belt, what's next for Big Bob? Ain't nothing next. I'ma keep going after that little chump, and take that belt back to the statue of Sam Houston. You listen here, boy. You shine that belt up real good, for I kick your ass. Lightning don't strike twice in the same place, so God get you. And it's gonna be good and bad. Yeah! Big Bob Buckland, down but not out. Chet? Now, sounds like someone plans to get back into the title hunt. And speaking of titles, let's get a word to our reigning champion from our own Rebecca Norsky. Becca? Becca, a well-endowed dwarf, stood next to the current champion, a human with black and white tights with the initials OMD emblazoned on them. Like his opponent, he too wore the wounds of battle on his face, but he was, of course, in a much better mood, a smile on his face and his belt on the shoulder. Hello, chat. I'm here with the reigning champion, Dexter Steen, fresh off his brutal title match with Big Bob Backlund. Dexter, what do you say to the detractors who didn't say you didn't have a chance against Big Bob in his own match? The wrestler looked at her with utter disgust before answering. Detractors? Honey, who gives a damn what they think? They were wrong. I won that match, but it should have come as no surprise to anyone who isn't me. I knew I was going to win the match the moment I accepted that no-talent chump's challenge. I beat that hairy redneck at his own game, so what more needs to be said? Indeed. But do you have a message to any other challengers for your title? Sure do. To all you low-brow punks who think they can take this belt from me, let tonight be a lesson for you. This belt is mine, and anyone who thinks they can take it from me, you best think again. I am the one-man dynasty, and my reign will last for a long time. Strong words from our champion. Back to you, Chet. Strong words indeed, Becca. Now all is left is the big question of the night. Who will be next to challenge for the title? We'll find out tomorrow night at IWF Battle Zone. This has been Chet Wildman. Send it back over to you, Zach and Vin. The screen shifted back to the lead anchors, with the male anchor speaking first. Oh, I can't wait for tomorrow night, Venus. Who you got pegged for a title shot? My money's on the Raging Storm. He's due for a title run. I agree. We'll see what's in store tomorrow night. Coming up next, see what happened. The latest fashion trends coming out of Savannah. What the fashion lords of the empire have to say. Also, if you own a Thunderbird, then find out what you need to keep your bird happy and healthy this season. All this coming up on our next segment, but first, a word from our sponsors. TV off, Lucas commanded, which the device performed, plunging into near darkness. He had another handful of cereal before he spoke again. Okay, guys, you can come out now. There was only silence that answered him. Come on, I don't have all night. Again, only silence. He started to get irritated, as evidenced by the slow growling, scrounging on his face. Look, I know you're there, so why don't you come out of there and we can get this crap done. I don't want to sleep when there are guests in my home, so come out now. All right. After a few moments of more silence, the subtle sounds of footballs could be heard in the room. He wouldn't have heard it with the TV on. Slowly emerging from the shadows came 5 men, all clad in black, their eyes covered in what could only be assumed as night vision goggles. In their hands were large Mark V assault rifles, each trained on his position and ready to fire at a moment's notice. Each stealthily took positions around him, targeting his vital points, ready to end his life if need be. Lucas took in his new guests, subtly gauging their appearances and weaponry in his ever-calm countenance. Hiya, fellas. I hope you didn't touch anything. The one behind him spoke in a low, threatening tone. Place your hands above your head. Lucas complied easy enough. You guys look hungry. Can I interest you in a milkshake? None of them answered. What? You don't like milkshakes? Well, that's just ungentlemanly not to like milkshakes. Be silent, the intruder ordered. You want to know what my favorite milkshake is? There was an audible click and the dull hum of a gun being pointed back to his head. I will not ask again. You sure? Because my favorite milkshake is buttercream. Just as he uttered the words, the lights turned on in full brightness, blinding the 5 men surrounding him. As they screamed in pain from such a bright and sudden light, Lucas sprang into action. He jumped from his seat and disarmed the intruder behind him, dropping him to the floor. He slipped the ammo clip from the gun and threw it across the room and into the other guy's throat. He used the rifle as a club to knock out 2 more on either side of him. He finished off the last one with a rather nice roundhouse kick to the face. Normal, he called out. The lights dimmed to their half of their full strength. The freelancer looked over the groaning forms of his would-be attackers. He reloaded the rifle he procured from the first intruder with the clip that was laying next to his gagging associate. He knelt down, pressing his knee to his throat. You guys are lucky. I would have killed the lot of you if I didn't want to lose my deposit. Now, who are you? He asked, but not really expecting an answer. You can't be burglars. Everyone knows not to break into this place. Plus, you didn't seem like you took anything, as far as I can see. He gave the gun a quick examination. A Mark V? This is military-grade hardware, so you definitely aren't robbers. He started to pat down the intruders. Can't be assassins. You lot would have gunned me down the moment I stepped to the door, so you must want me alive. But for what? He continued his search. All he found were extra clips of ammo, a few grenades, and some other devices he couldn't readily identify. Lucas pulled up his sleeves, revealing the sleeves of one, revealing a small tattoo emblazoned on his skin. It was a red circle with jagged edges that peeked out around it, like scales almost. Inside the circle was the English letter D, with the small bat wings jutting out from the sides of it. Hello, nurse. He recognized the symbol. Of course he knew what the symbol was. Everyone in the Empire knew what that symbol meant. He nodded his head. He knew who these men were, and more importantly, he knew who they worked for. He rose to his feet, gun slack in his hand, and he said, You can come out too now. I know who you are. I know you're there, and I know who you are. Unlike before, there was no attempt to fool them into thinking he was alone. The sound of the bedroom door opened and put an end to that. There were 2 more individuals that entered the scene. One was dressed like the others, similar black garb, but sans night vision goggles. Instead, he had a dark red beret on. He seemed to be the commander of this little group. Next to him was a person in a jet black robe with a hood over his head, obscuring his face. Or someone he assumed was a he. You better not have touched my stuff back there, Lucas quipped. Neither seemed to care for his brand of humor. Tough crowd. All right, let's get down to business. So what can I do for you this fine evening, Your Highness? There was a small utterance of laughter coming from the hooded person. A hearty type of laughter one would expect from someone in a high station in life. Very impressive, Lucas Kane. He pulled down his hood to reveal his face to all. His skin tone was of a whitish pallor, almost like a marble statue in a way. Long bone-white hair that flowed from the top of his skull to halfway down his back, and his eyes were an intense crimson that almost glowed in the semi-dark apartment. Lucas knew who he was. Everyone knew who he was. This was His Royal Highness, Prince Vladimir Sepish Dracula VI, firstborn of the Emperor Vladimir V, and next in line for the throne of the Empire. Or would you prefer Luke? My mother calls me Lucas. My friends call me Luke, and you're neither, shithead. The officer's face instantaneously grew enraged as he advanced forward, hand on his sidearm. How dare you speak to the prince in such a... His writing was cut short by the hand of the prince, stopping him from advancing upon Luke with ill intentions. The officer looked at his sovereign, his eyes silently asking why. The prince merely shook his head. Resigned, he stood back at his prince, stood forward. Is that a line from one of your inane old world movies? He asked. Lucas smirked. Yeah, I've been waiting to use that for a while. Prince Vlad walked around the living room, seeing his men slowly recover from the human's assault. Your failed attempts at humor aside, I must admit a grudging admiration for how well you were able to take down my men. Tell me, how did you do it? He asked, motioning to the lights. My dwarf friend is very good with electrical wiring, he answered. I had him mod the voice switch to activate the illumination levels to certain phrases said in a certain order. Helps against guys who use night vision goggles. Interesting. And how did you know my men were here? My men made sure nothing was disturbed or put out of place. Sure enough, they did a decent job. But they forgot about the loose floorboard. The prince looked back at his officer. He shook his head. There was no loose floorboard. We checked, sire. Lucas walked over to the entrance of the apartment and knelt down. It's understandable. You wouldn't have noticed if it really. He pointed to the board as he stepped on when he entered the apartment. This board is loose, but you really wouldn't notice it if this was your first time here. It doesn't take much to get this board to stick again. Just stepping on it does it. I keep it like this as a way to see if anyone has been in here. As soon as I stepped on it, I knew someone was here. Took me a bit to figure out how many. You guys hit pretty well. The prince seemed satisfied with his answers. The human walked back over to the couch and sat on the edge, saying, That doesn't answer my question. What do you want? The prince stared at Lucas as if appraising him and his value to the task at hand. He was no stranger to this. Lucas had worked with and for members of the nobility, both in his days as a cop and as his time as a freelancer. He didn't too much care for how they looked at him, but it was something he was used to seeing, sadly. After a minute of silence, the prince spoke. Captain, leave us. But sire, the captain protested, but was silenced by the glove-covered hand of his leader. I will speak with this man alone. You and your men will shade yourselves. That is an order. The soldiers of the royal guard were fiercely protective and steadfastly loyal to the crown. Despite his obvious reservations, the captain had to follow his master's orders. You heard him, men. We shade. The others, who were now recovered from their beating, stood up and holstered their arms. One by one, they seemed to melt back into the shadows, erasing all traces of their existence. The captain was the last to do so, but before shooting a threatening glare to Lucas, the meaning was clear. If anything happened to the prince, and he was a dead man. Just like that, Lucas was alone with the future ruler of one of the 3 largest nations on the planet. Okay, we're alone, said Lucas. What do you want from me? The prince paced a bit, trying to find the exact words to use. Finally, he spoke. I am in need of your services, Lucas Kane. You want to hire me? The vampire nodded curtly. I'm flattered that you went to so much trouble, but you know there are other freelancers who'd be happy to serve you. Larger, more organized groups. Lucas decided to see what the prince was thinking. True, but I've done my research. Of all the freelancers on this side of the empire, yours has the highest success rate. 94% to be exact. You even got the numbers, too. But there has to be more to it than that. More than just how many jobs I've done. Yes, you are correct. The other reason is secrecy. Compared to most others in your field, you take your oath of secrecy about your clients to heart. So I keep my mouth shut. What of it? That's just it. This particular job requires absolute secrecy to the highest degree. But then again, you already knew that. Lucas's face was awash with surprise, but the prince didn't seem to buy it. Oh, come on, Lucas Kane. A man of your deductive abilities would have figured out my reasoning for coming here to your home in the middle of the night. So don't play dumb with me. The freelancer chuckled a bit. Okay, you got me. I pegged it when I saw the symbol on your man's arm. You really don't want anyone to know about this, huh? Yes. For reasons I would get into if you decide to take the job. You know, you could just order me to do it. Yes, said the prince, looking at Lucas as if he were considering the option. I could indeed. But no, I believe your performance of your duties would be more effective if you were a willing participant. Huh. A high noble not using his status to get what he wants. Progress. Needless to say, the Prince of Light was not impressed by his humor. Okay. I'll hear it, but that doesn't mean I'm taking the job, though. Once again, there was a pregnant pause. The prince paced around a bit, trying to order his thoughts. This didn't go unnoticed by Lucas. He could tell that whatever this job was, it seemed deeply personal to him. He seemed to want to say the right words to convince him to take this job. Finally, he spoke. tell me something. Have you ever heard of a man named Silas Blackthorne? Lucas arched his eyebrow in recognition. Professor Silas Blackthorne? Ah, so you're familiar with him. Of course. Any old world hunter knows about him. He's one of the Empire's leading experts on the old world. Teaches a class at AXU down south. I didn't know you went to college. I didn't. I just sat in on one of his lectures. Old world social media and its influences on politics. Interesting speech for someone like me. Got a chance to even talk with him, with the prof. Cool guy. He offered to buy me a drink. Turned him down. Didn't care for his company? Nah, I don't drink. The prince nodded, with a bit of respect for his sobriety. So what's this got to do with all this? They paused again. This time a bit longer. This felt different from the other times. It was subtle. The pain in his eyes. To anyone else, it would have been lost in the stone-like appearance, the veneer of imperial perfection. But for someone like Lucas, it was there, like a cracked door. He could peek in, but he couldn't see the whole picture. His Highness was about to open the rest of the door and give him the full Monty. Professor Blackthorne is dead. The moment he said that sentence, the mood changed for Lucas. The slight jovial nature in his face and posture vanished and was replaced with stone-cold seriousness, and that frankly surprised Prince Vlad. He gazed at him in a way that could rival the fierceness of his own guardians. This is what Lucas looked like when he was serious, and he could see why this lowly human was once the most successful officers in the history of the New York IPD. I hadn't heard anything about that. He spoke, his voice much lower than before. I'm keeping that bit of information off the press for now. I don't want the world to know, but just yet. This is something to do with the job you want me to do. Everything to do with it, he started. The professor was my mentor, my teacher from when I was younger. Handpicked by my father to tutor me and expand my knowledge of the world, or the old world. He always talked in such a way that made history come alive. He was my favorite teacher. We stayed in contact as much as we could. Letter, holophones, visits to the castle. He was always a welcome sight, even when he rambled on and on about the old world. There was a barely restrained sorrow in his voice. That was not to lose to know that he was telling the truth. He tried to hide it with his usual war disposition, but the pain was there. Real pain. The pain of losing a friend. He knew that pain all too well. And then he continued. About 7 months ago, the professor contacts me, excited for something big. He claimed to have found the location of a place called, what was it again? Area 51? Lucas perked up. He found Area 51? You know of it? Sure enough. Area 51 was a top-secret military base for the old United States somewhere out in the desert. The government denied that the place even existed, even though eyewitness reports and photos said otherwise. Any idea what went on the base? Nothing but rumors and tall tales. Some say it was a secret testing site for the newest in military hardware. Others think it was a think tank to research human psychic potential. Hell, some even think it was a holding ground for crashed alien technology. Hard to say what to believe was true or not. I see. Well, the professor claimed to have sussed out the location of the base and had hoped to lead an expedition to uncover its secrets, but sadly, the university refused to fund such an endeavor. What changed? He contacted me all those months ago and told me that he found a backer, someone who came to him asking to fund his expedition with all the money and resources he could ever need. Of course, he jumped at the offer, wanting to satisfy his academic curiosity. Did he say who it was? No, he never gave a name. I don't think he even knew the name of his backer, but he was thrilled to be able to finally search for Area 51. What happened to him out there? What'd he find? I believe I should let the good professor tell you himself. Before Lucas could inquire the meaning of his words, he pulled out from under his cloak a small, round, disc-shaped object, silver in color, with several knobs and buttons along the edge. This recorder contains the last 5 hollow messages he sent to me before his demise. It would surely provide you with more information than I can. Lucas took the object in question and pressed a button on the side. A holographic image display illuminated the room with a set of messages lit in green projected in front of him. He queued up the earliest of the 5 messages and began to play back. Immediately, the image of the late Professor Blackthorne appeared before him. The spectacled vampire looked up to Lucas, his face frozen before he selected to play back the message. Message 1. Subject. Arrived at dig site. 2. Prince Vladimir suppresses Dracula the Sixth from Professor Silas Blackthorne. My prince, my students and I have arrived at the dig site. It's marvelous. I cannot tell you how I feel at this moment. Almost like a child on All Saints' Day, eager to open his presents. The area itself hasn't been touched by development, and thus we have it all to ourselves, without anyone trampling the site. We are miles from our hotel room, but thankfully the commute is manageable. The equipment we procured, thanks to our backer, arrived ahead of schedule. You should see it, my prince. Never in my wildest dreams would I have imagined using a Benson collector on a dig. Truly marvelous. Using holoscans, we have found the main complex of the base, buried in over 1,000 years of rock, debris, and sediment. The main complex is huge, with many subsections connected to it. I could excavate this site for years and not even be halfway done with what I could potentially find. The only downside, if you could call it that, is the handler. I don't know what else to call him other than handler, but it seemed appropriate. His name is Regal, a dwarf who represents our backer at the site. A rather unpleasant individual. Slimy. Yes, that's the right word for him. Regal provided us with the funds as needed, as well as the proper paperwork needed for the work. But he tends to slink around like some sort of snake or some low-crawling serpent. I will tolerate his presence, but only for the good of the mission. I will message you when we have future developments. Message end. Message 2. Subject. Excavation. To Prince Vladimir suppresses Dracula the Sixth from Professor Silas Blackthorne. My prince, after 3 weeks of digging, we have breached the main complex. Oh, you should see it, my friend. The complex is larger than the scan showed. There is a wealth of old-world technology here. Prototype airplanes, military vehicles of varying sizes and shapes, and the entire complex was powered by an experimental generator system, not too dissimilar to the ether drives we use today. It's amazing how far they were able to get in the field of clean energy. We've only started digging into the sub-areas, but eager signs are promising. Regal continues to be a source of annoyance. Besides the fact that he has been hitting on many of my male students, he's always buzzing about the digging areas, asking the staff what about we found, almost hourly. I believe he wants to know if we found something, but I don't know what he wants us to find. He's even entered my tent one morning before I had the chance to inject my sunshade. The little bully nearly burned my skin off. I got fed up with him and asked him what it is he wants us to find. He simply said nothing that would be important to you. I did not inquire again, knowing he would just not be forthcoming with real answers. There is something else. Nothing big, but it is unsettling. One of my students, Kim, told me about something that had happened to her, and the others creeped her out. There have been some men who have been appearing outside the camp. 2 men exactly. Men in black suits in a dark-colored truck. They were too far away to make out who they were. They have done nothing but overtly threatening or menacing. All they've been doing is watching us. Just watching. A few of the students did try to go over to inquire about their identities, but every time they approached, the men returned to their vehicles and drove off. And then an hour later they would return and resume their previous activities. Honestly, I'd be less perturbed if they were more threatening or menacing, but the fact that all they're doing is watching does not fill me with calm. Hopefully, when next I transmit, I'll be in a better mood. Until next time, Your Highness. Message end. Message 3. Subject. Discovery. To Prince Vladimir suppresses Dracula the Sixth from Professor Silas Blackthorne. My prince, what a wondrous day! We have reached the lowest, most secure level of the site. The scans showed that the security in this area was probably the tightest in the entire site. Well, it would have been if the security measures were still functioning. After drilling through a massive rusted door, we found only one object. This could be the pinnacle of old-world technological advancements. I cannot say what it is. This line might not be secure. Sadly, my joy is tampered by a sense of incoming dread. Remember those men I told you about a few weeks past? It seems they have brought friends. Indeed, the number of men in black has increased. By my last count, there are up to 12. Their actions mirror the first two. Simple observation. I had originally shared my concerns about them with Regal, but he simply said they were just tourists. I now believe that not only does this dwarf know who these men are, but it's possible he is in league with them. Does this mean that these men work for the backer? All I have a supposition and conjecture, but how else do you explain it? It is quite possible that this item that we found is what Regal, and by extension the backer, have been looking for. I have instructed my students to keep the discovery to us and not let Regal know about anything. I don't know what could happen if they learn about our finding it. I will try to plan to remove the item without the dwarf's knowledge. Until next time, my prince. Message end. Message 4. Subject none. To Prince Vladimir Stepesius Dracula VI from Professor Silas Blackthorn. I am sending this message from a truck train heading to New Georgia City. After 6 months, the expedition has ended, and in not too nice of a way. We were able to get the item smuggled onto the truck without Regal noting, or at least that's what we thought we did. We told him some excuse about needing to head back to the hotel. The truth is, we have been planning our getaway for weeks now. I no longer see any reason to stay here and risk my life and the life of my students. We have our notes and gear placed in the station, so we could jump under the red eye back home. We were halfway to the hotel when the men in black began to pursue us. The chase was harrowing. Our truck was rammed a few times, but one of my students, Barney, was a capable driver. There was quite a few moments when I thought we would crash, but Barney's skillful driving was enough to evade our foes. We reached the station just in time to load up and leave town. We may have escaped, but I fear we are not out of the grasp of the backer. Even now, as the truck train speeds along the highway back home, I fear this situation has gone beyond my expectations. Dear gods, has my eagerness for discovery cost me more than I can imagine? Message end. Message 5. Subject none. To Prince Vladimir Stepesius Dracula VI from Professor Silas Blackthorn. My prince, by the time you receive this message, I will more than likely be dead, or at the very least missing. The situation has turned grim. When I returned to campus, my office was ransacked. My home mirrored its condition as well. I haven't told any of the faculty members or the authorities about this. I am not sure who to trust anymore. I have my suspicions on who the backer might be, but they are just that, suspicions. I do not know what these men want with the item, but I feel it could change the very landscape of the Empire itself. I cannot tell you what it is. I fear this channel is being monitored, but I will enclose the shape and dimensions of the item in case you are able to search for it. I have hidden my notes on everything I have seen and experienced over the last 6 months concerning the backer. You must follow Leonardo. Only in his footsteps will you find the truth. Right now, I am preparing to meet with a friend of mine who has connections with the New Georgia IPD. But even then, I hold no aspirations of surviving beyond tonight. I know that I will soon die, but I do not regret dying. My only regret is dragging my students on this escapade. My prince, you have always been my favorite and most brilliant student, and it pains me that I will not see you ascend the throne. But I am certain you will be a wise and just ruler like your father before you. I hope that my actions haven't endangered you or your family, and I hope that you can forgive an old fool his mistake. It's time. I go to meet my destiny. I hope you will know more than me when you play this message, and pray that you and yours survive the coming storm. May the moon never set on the house of Dracula. Message end. End of messages. Would you like to play the messages again? It goes without saying that Lucas did not wish to hear any more, so he switched off the recording. It was heartbreaking to watch a man go from elation about the discovery of a lifetime to fear and finally grim resignation. It felt sobering to hear his last moments. A shame, too. Lucas really liked the professor. Not as much as the Prince Vlad, it seemed. He had his back to him the entire time. Presumably, he just didn't want to see his mentor like that again. He turned back around and said, 6 days after I received the last message, Professor Blackthorn was found on the Georgia Strand, immolated by sunlight. He rubbed his eyes, trying to fight back a few tears that dared escape him. The official stance is suicide. They believe that the professor was overcome by feelings of failure, having not found his prize. Bah! As if I had my way, those fools would be pounding a beat in the colonies. Of course he didn't. What about his students? The other researchers that went with him? Prince Vlad shook his head. We looked into the matter as much as I can at the moment. All of them either died in accidents or just went missing. Lucas said, well, that's not good. Any clues you could find? None, the vampire answered. My agents searched his office, his home, and anywhere else he might have hidden his notes. Nothing. Simply a few old world books that he read. I assume those men in black took whatever they could, leaving nothing for us. But there was one thing. My men were able to lift this off his body. Once again, the prince reached into his cloak and removed the other object. This was found in his hands. I think he must have ripped it off his killer or killers. Lucas examined the object in question. It was a patch made of red and black thread with seared edges, most likely from the poor vampire's death. In the center of was a black raven in the profile. This is a pirate sigil. The prince agrees with this assessment. But that's impossible. Pirates on the mainland? There's no way they should even be here unless... He entertained the possibility in his mind. Then his eyes widened and locked on the prince. The recognition between them as he connected the dots and made his conclusion. So that's the reason why you want this shit to be so hush-hush. So you see it. Damn it, I do. He didn't want to think about what this all meant, but it was right there in his hands. And suddenly the room felt a bit darker and a tad bit heavier for Lucas Kane. He felt just a bit out of his depth with the situation, massive as it was. But if he was shaken up by this revelation, it didn't show. You really think one of the noble houses could have done something with this? I mean, the implications alone. This is high treason shit. The prince took a contemplative posture. Believe me, it does not inspire confidence in me as well. The high vampiric houses have always been loyal to my family, stretching back generations to even before the founding of the empire, but there have been some grumblings from the High Lords. That deal with the Protectorate? Yes. Many of the High Lords didn't agree with my father handling of the POV, especially after the war. They felt they should have invaded and put a final end to them 40 years ago. I knew they disagreed with my father's rulings, but outright treason? I don't want to believe it, but the evidence says otherwise. Then why not just investigate this yourself? You certainly have more access to more resources than I do. Don't you think I considered that option? He let out a frustrated sigh. My family is powerful, that's a given, but we are also watched. Our every action and movement is looked upon by the nobles at almost every major moment. If I start investigating my teacher's death, the nobles will certainly know about it, including this backer. When that happens, he will vanish in the halls of aristocracy. It could be months or even years before I pick up his trail again, and by then, it could be too late to stop whatever he and his allies could be planning. That's why I need you, Lucas Kane. I need someone who can look into this from outside the royal family. You can go places without the nobility knowing or caring about what you do. A lowly human doing a job would not raise the attentions of my enemies. As I said before, I will not order you to do this, but if you do not, I will be forced to give up my investigating and I do not know what the future holds for my family and by extension the empire. He was right. The royal family was the lifeblood of the empire. Without the Draculas, the empire would be not the superpower it is right now. It was a fact. No other vampiric family could have done as greatly a job as they have, and now that family lay threatened, and the stability of his nation lay in the balance. Lucas looked down at the recorder and the sigil in his hands. He processed all the information he was told and learned in the last half hour since the meeting started. He had more than enough reason to turn him down. He wasn't under any orders to take the job, and the prince certainly would not blame him if he decided to turn him down. But unknown to even himself, he had already made a decision. He just needed all the facts. What's the job? The prince smiled on the inside. What's the job? Those three magic words. When he looked up Lucas Kane, he learned that the human would hear you out, but not always accept the job presented to him. Only when he uttered those three words did he finally make the choice to welcome the job. He wouldn't ask what it was unless he was willing to take it on. He handed Lucas a small piece of paper. These are the measurements of the professor the professor sent me about the object. Looks like some kind of case. Lucas said after looking over the numbers. Yes. I want you to retrieve this item from the persons who took it from my teacher and deliver it personally to me at Castle Dracula. I will give you special clearance at the main gate and past the wall guard. You are not to leave it with anyone or nor give it to anyone who claims to represent me. You will hand it directly to me. You are not to open it or examine the item as well. You will bring it to me in the condition you acquire it in. I will see for myself why this thing was so important to go to such lengths to find it. Gotcha. A retrieval job will run the normal rate. I will pay you and your associates 4 times the normal rate. I believe you have earned more than that. Lucas perked up a bit. 4 times the normal rate would certainly be a lot of money. Enough to afford a few things he had his eye on, but this wasn't about money. Not entirely. Someone he knew and liked was murdered. He wished to find out who did it, and have a few words with them, spoken with his fists. Also, if finding the object in question leads you to the person or persons responsible for the death of my teacher, Lucas raised an eyebrow. He knew what he was implying without having him say it. You know I'm not supposed to do that. Officially, I mean. I'm aware. I'm merely suggesting that if the need comes up that you must put a permanent end to them, please make it as painful as possible. Fair enough. The prince tapped the watch-like device on his wrist. It signaled the captain to return from the shadows on bended knee. Your Highness? My business is concluded here, Captain. We are leaving. Yes, Your Highness. The loyal soldier stood up and prepared to shade himself along with his sovereign, but not before shooting another sour glance at the human. Lucas didn't seem to care about him at this point. Just before he took to the shadows, the prince turned to address him one more time. 2 weeks, Lucas Kane. You have 2 weeks. And hopefully the next time we meet, you have more answers than I did this time. And with that, the crown prince and the captain dissolved into the shadows, leaving Lucas alone in his apartment. He had hoped to laze about in his home, watch the old TV shows he needed to catch up on, or finish playing that one hard video game that seemed to not want to be beaten by him. Fate decided that he would not have such an opportunity in the near future. Little did he realize that the meeting tonight would have a titanic impact on his life, and that the destiny of the entire empire would soon rest on his shoulders. But now was not the time for that. He needed sleep. Tomorrow there will be discussions with his crew, plans to be made, and information to gather. So with that in his mind, he retired to his bed, slipped off his shoes, and fell onto his bed, slipping into a quick sleep. The next 2 weeks were going to be busy. He'd need the energy. And thus endeth the chapter. Woo! Oh, that was 3 hours, 41 minutes. Yes, we have done well. All right, guys. What did you think? What's your opinions of the story so far? It's getting really heavy. Let me know in the chat what you think. I need your opinions. I see we got some new peeks in the chat. We got A.V. Walker, Don, I know you're here, Maria Lopez, King J, and Crazy C Productions. So what did you guys think? Edge of your seat so far? Boring, bland, good, great? I want to hear your opinions. What do you think? Damn, my voice is tired. Didn't expect it to go this long. Thank you, Crazy C. Appreciate it. But yeah, that is the first 2 chapters of New World. As you can see, it's very much. Thank you, Devil. I try to do my best with the voice work. I'm not the best when it comes to impersonating voices, especially my Irish and whatever it is that I pulled out of my ass for the dwarves. It's doing okay. All right. Yeah, the plot is about to get thicker. Just wait, because but that will have to wait until next time, because my voice is tired, and we're gonna resume this hopefully probably next weekend or some other time when you guys are off, and we could continue with the book to find out how Lucas and the crew are going to uncover this conspiracy, what they need to do, and where they need to go, and you're gonna find out a little bit more about our dear boy Lucas Kane. Oh, thanks for the ideas. Took a bit of time to get the world building down. I made a couple of mistakes, but I can rectify that in the past. But yeah, that's it for tonight. I want to thank everybody for coming out and enjoying the stream. Hopefully we'll do this next weekend or sometime next week if the time finds it. So and we have some free time, so you guys can enjoy and figure out what happens next in the story. And hopefully the twists and turns will be enough to keep you interested. If you like this, remember to like, comment, and subscribe. All of it helps the channel. If you want to support me directly, paypal.com/ShinTigerCurl, or you can just do patreon.com/ShinTigerCurl. All of it would be helpful. Very nice. So until next time, it's been Shin Tiger Curl, that dude in the straw hat, saying good night, and in the new